Chapter 2069. Whoosh. Hichu Luoshu shook violently, and the lake of honey was reduced by a third. At this rate, Moronyu only needed 3 chances to collect all the honey here. However, he had only collected it once when the bee rushed in from outside. Morongyu's divine telekinesis had already spread out in the space where the honey was. Hence, he discovered the bee immediately. Soul Anchor. Holy Soul Slash. Before the bee could react, Morongyu's soul attack had already slashed towards it. Plop! The bee fell directly onto the beehive, dead as a doornail. Until its death, it did not understand who killed it and how it was killed. Whoosh! Whoosh! The lake-like honey was directly collected by Hitu and Luoshu. Then, Hichu Luoshu shrunk rapidly and turned into a ray of light that entered Morongyu's body. Morongyu took a step forward and disappeared from where he stood. From the beginning to the end, he'd been invisible. After leaving the beehive, Morongyu rushed to another beehive. Just after Morongyu left the beehive, "Hey, I've finally snuck in. This time, I must take all the honey." The giant panda sneaked into the beehive and excitedly prepared to collect the honey. However, it soon saw that there was nothing in front of it. There was not even a drop of honey. This wasn't a normal situation. Furthermore, there was a dead bee nearby. "Damn kid, you stole all the honey." The giant panda let out a cry of grief and indignation. However, it quickly realized what was going on. With a swoosh, it turned into a ray of light and rushed into the distance. The moment the giant panda moved, countless bees flew in from the surrounding tunnels. The reason why there weren't any bees nearby was because they were all surrounding the soul-stabilizing beast. This gave Morongyu a great opportunity. Buzz, the sound of rushing could be heard continuously as countless bees rushed towards the giant panda. The giant panda's expression changed. It had already increased its speed to the maximum and disappeared into the beehive with a swoosh. These bees were not very powerful, and their speed was far inferior to that of the giant panda. Hence, they could not catch up at all. However, if the giant panda was surrounded by them, it would have suffered a great loss last time and almost died here. Looking at the empty beehive, there was not even a drop of honey left. The bees were instantly enraged. They all thought that the giant panda had stolen it. Hence, each and every one of them went after the giant panda in a frenzy. The giant panda took the blame and was so angry that it screamed. At this moment, Morongyu had already rushed into the second beehive. Whoosh! After entering the beehive, Morongyu stopped his footsteps immediately. It was not that he did not want to continue, but the beehive was filled with bees, as if they were making honey or something. After watching for a while, Morongyu realized that there was no chance for him to make a move. Once he made a move, the bees was the giant panda was. Then, they would surround and attack. Hence, he quickly retreated and searched for the third beehive. Because he was gloomy, the bees did not notice him at all. Moreover, with the fixed spirit beast and the giant panda attracting the bees' attention, Morongyu could be said to have entered a deserted area. He entered more than 10 beehives in a row. Most of the beehives had a large number of bees. However, Morongyu still took 3 beehives. At this moment, he had opened up 3 separate spaces in the Hichu Luoshu to store the honey. The reason why they were stored separately was because he realized that the honey was different. Some were more mottled, while some were more pure. Naturally, their effects would be different. 3 lakes of honey. Not to mention the whole Shenzhen, it was not even enough for Morongyu, the big eater. Hence, he continued to linger. However, because the honey of a few beehives had been stolen, the bees were all mobilized. There were a large number of bees patrolling in each beehive. Next, Morongyu sneaked into hundreds of beehives, but he still could not make a move. Moreover, the further he went, the stronger the bees were. At this moment, the giant panda and the fixed spirit beast had already escaped from this space and entered the tunnel. This space had already quieted down. However, the bees seemed to have sensed that there were enemies nearby and continued to patrol with greater intensity. Morongyu could not find a chance to make a move, which was quite depressing. However, Morongyu was still going deeper. The deeper he went, the higher the quality of the honey. If these honey were to be graded, the honey that Muronyu collected at the beginning was the lowest grade, which could only be considered as level 1. This honey should have reached level 9, right? Looking at the golden honey in front of him, Muronyu's face was full of shock. Not only was the honey golden, but it was also transparent. An incomparably rich fragrance emanated from the honey, making one feel relaxed and happy. Most importantly, there was not much honey guarding this beehive. There were only a few, and those few honey were still dozing off. This was definitely the best opportunity. Murongyu could not bear it any longer. Soul fixation. Holy soul slash. The soul attack directly exploded, instantly killing those few bee guards who were not very strong. At the same time, he had already taken out the Hichu Luo Shu. The Hichu Luo Shu expanded with the wind, rapidly expanding until it covered all the honey. Then, under Murongyu's control, it began to devour the honey crazily. A few breaths of time passed, and all the honey had been collected by Murongyu. Murongyu did not hesitate, and directly rushed into the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, the Hichu Luo Shu teleported and left the beehive. Just after he left, a sharp claw with a terrifying aura directly reached into the beehive from the endless void and ruthlessly struck the position where Murongyu was originally standing. However, Murongyu had already disappeared without a trace. The next moment, a small, black bee appeared in the beehive. When it saw the empty beehive without a drop of honey, it could not help but roar angrily. Squeak. The terrifying sound contained a terrifying sound wave attack. Wherever it passed, the void was shattered. Even the beehive where it was located trembled violently, as if it was about to shatter. Whoosh! Fortunately, the bee quickly left the place. Otherwise, this beehive would definitely be shattered. However, its angry cry caused all the bees in the space to go crazy. One by one, they rushed out, trying to find Murongyu. Then what about Murongyu? Murongyu did not leave, but entered the next beehive. The honey in this beehive was also quite high grade, and there were many bees guarding it. However, Murongyu did not care so much. After entering this place, he immediately took out the Hichu Luo Shu and began to collect the honey by force. At the same time, he also used the most violent soul attack. Soul calming, soul calming, soul calming. After a few consecutive soul calming, before the bees could react, Murongyu had already collected all the honey in the beehive. Then, he was teleported to the next beehive. Previously, every time Murongyu went to a beehive, although he did not do anything. Instead, he secretly left a teleportation jade slip where he was, one by one, he was teleported. Some of the beehive's honey was completely collected by him. Some of the beehives could only collect a little. This was because the bees reacted too quickly and there were too many of them. Murongyu did not want to be surrounded by them. Therefore, he only tried his best to collect as much honey as possible. However, in the end, almost every beehive was occupied by bees, and there was no chance for him to do anything. Finally, Murongyu decided to leave this place. Moreover, his harvest was huge, and it was enough. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With his body concealed, Murongyu flew toward the outside. The bees behind him chased after him. It was as if they had a special way to track down Murongyu. Murongyu had felt it before. Every time he appeared in a beehive, the bees outside would rush over frantically. If they could not track him, Murongyu would not believe that they could react so quickly. Whoosh! Murongyu had just rushed into one of the passageways when he stopped. This was because he saw a group of familiar people in front of him. It was the experts from Demon Sealing Sect, Mo Wu, and the rest. After pausing for a while, Murongyu continued to fly forward. Before Mo Wu and the rest could react, he had already flown past them. Mo Wu had actually sensed Murongyu's fast speed. However, before he could make a move, a sea of bees rushed over like a flood. Mo Wu and the rest did not know what was going on at all, and they started fighting with these bees. Although there were many bees, those from Demon Sealing Sect who entered here were all experts, and Mo Wu was in existence at the peak of Genesis Realm. Therefore, in an instant, a large number of these bees died. However, not only did the death of the bees not make them retreat, but they also rushed forward without any regard for their lives, dauntlessly advancing wave after wave. Although Mo Wu and the rest were powerful, the bees seemed to be endless as they rushed over. In fact, the bees even chose to attack suicidally. Therefore, not long after, people from Demon Sealing Sect began to die. Even Mo Wu could not protect them. In the end, Mo Wu ordered them to retreat while fighting. And Murong had already left this passageway and appeared in another one far away. At this time, he was already sitting cross-legged in the Hichu Luo Shu, preparing to refine the honey. He had a feeling that with the honey in his hands, he would definitely be able to advance to Insight Realm. Chapter 2070. Plop. Murong jumped straight into the lake like honey. The next moment, the hundreds of millions of pores all over his body opened up at the same time. Then he sucked hard, and instantly, countless honey rushed into his body like a torrent. This honey was indeed different from ordinary honey. After the honey entered Murong-Yu's body, it automatically melted and turned into energy that surged into Murong-Yu's limbs and bones, increasing Murong-Yu's strength. During this process, Murong-Yu's physical body realm was increasing. However, his soul was not nourished, so it did not improve for a while. However, as long as his cultivation and physical body could be improved, it was fine. Murong-Yu's strength could still skyrocket. His strength was slowly increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. He did not know how much time had passed during his cultivation. On this day, Murong-Yu suddenly felt that there was no energy entering his body. Therefore, he opened his eyes to take a look, only to find that the lake of honey had been completely devoured by him, and his realm had not broken through yet. One had to know that Murong-Yu did not absorb the lowest grade honey, but the relatively higher grade honey. It was about level 7 or 8. At this speed, I'm afraid I'll need more honey to break through. Murong-Yu was speechless. However, he didn't hesitate to jump into another honey lake. Although honey was precious, if it was not used to increase one's strength, then it was nothing. Moreover, as long as Murong-Yu became stronger, he could steal more honey. One by one, the honey lakes were continuously absorbed by Murong-Yu. On this day, Murong-Yu's realm finally broke through. He broke through from level 9 of the creation realm to the insight realm. His strength had increased by more than 100 times. At this moment, Murong-Yu felt that he had extremely powerful strength. When he was at level 9 of the creation realm, his combat strength was only equivalent to level 3 of the creation realm. And after breaking through, his combat strength increased again, but it was still unable to reach level 4 of the creation realm. It was just that he had improved a lot on his previous foundation, becoming even more powerful. With his current battle prowess, in a situation where he did not need to use soul attacks, he could barely battle a 4th stage creation realm elite. If his physical body also broke through to the insight realm, Murong-Yu's battle prowess could completely rise to the 4th level of the creation realm. The increase in strength was one aspect. After reaching the netherworld realm, Murong-Yu had a strange feeling in his heart. Or rather, something had happened to his physical body. In reality, his physical body hadn't changed at all. Murong-Yu thought it was just an illusion. He felt that his corporeal body had suddenly become hollow. It was empty inside, as if an incomparably huge space had appeared. His soul space and Dantian were both separate spaces. But now he wasn't feeling these two places but his entire body. The so-called profound insight realm. The body is like the profound insight, and one can establish a small world. A trace of understanding suddenly arose in Murong-Yu's heart. Just like how those in the creation realm could create living creatures, those in the insight realm could create small worlds. What was the so-called small world? For example, the holy world, the divine world, and the celestial world, and other worlds that couldn't produce rebirth realm elites were small worlds. The holy world should also be established by some elite. Then, how did those in the insight realm establish a small world? Just like how those in the creation realm created things, they needed the support of their own strength. However, they all needed a medium. Other than strength, those in the creation realm needed blood essence to create things. And those in the insight realm also needed a medium to create a small world. Physical body. As long as they were in the insight realm, they had to establish a small world in their own body. Of course, after the small world was established, they could also strip it away. The stronger one was, the more small worlds they could establish. But most insight realm elites could only establish one small world in their lifetime, because having more small worlds wasn't beneficial to them. In fact, many insight realm elites didn't establish a small world in their lifetime. After all, when building a small world, it would consume a lot of their strength. And later on, they also needed to divide their attention to manage and maintain it. This kind of hollow feeling that appeared in Murong Yu's body was precisely the feeling of being able to establish a small world. As long as Murong Yu was willing, he could completely establish a small world now. However, Murong Yu forcefully suppressed his desire to establish a small world. With his current strength, he could only establish a small world at most, and whether he could strip it away from his body was still a problem. Moreover, with the strength of the insight realm, he absolutely couldn't put a planet as big as the holy world into Hichuluo Shu. Therefore, he had to give the opportunity to establish a small world to the holy world. Once he took back the holy world, then he would immediately refine it into his small world. Then, Murong Yu could take away the small world. Most importantly, once the holy world became his small world, Murong Yu could release all the people, demons, and so on inside at will. Let them not need to explore reincarnation to be able to roam the endless starry sky. Continue to increase his strength. After consolidating his cultivation, Murong Yu once again raised his physical body to the first level of the insight realm. At this time, his battle prowess was still at the third level of the creation realm, but it had already reached the peak of the third level of the creation realm. He could even forcefully kill an ordinary fourth level of the creation realm powerhouse. At this time, in Hichuluo Shu, there was only the highest grade lake honey and the lowest grade honey left. The rest of the honey had already been used up by him. Moreover, at this time, those honey were already not that useful to him. Even if he absorbed all the honey in the beehive, Murong Yu would probably not be able to increase his strength by a few small realms. There was no choice, his appetite was too big. It was very difficult for ordinary things to satisfy him. Swish! His figure swayed, and Murong Yu already rushed out of Hichuluo Shu. And, just as he appeared, Murong Yu's soul trembled slightly. This was not encountering danger, but encountering the reaction of a soul cultivator. He just didn't know if the other party could sense his existence. It's the fixed soul beast. Murong Yu's expression changed slightly. The fixed soul beast he sensed should be the one that chased after him previously. However, he could clearly feel that this fixed soul beast did not seem to be as powerful as before. There was only one possibility for this situation. The fixed soul beast was injured, and it was not lightly injured. In fact, the other party could not even sense Murong Yu's existence, because Murong Yu did not notice that the other party had moved. It was very likely that the fixed soul beast was in seclusion to heal its injuries or something. If that was the case, a cold light flashed across Murong Yu's eyes. He had been chased by the fixed soul beast previously. Was it time to settle the score now? Thus, he concealed himself and slowly made his way towards a soul-fixed beast. During this process, Murong Yu appeared to be very careful. After all, he did not know if the fixed soul beast was seriously injured or if it was just waiting for him to fall into a trap. The fixed soul beast was not very far from Murong Yu. Otherwise, Murong Yu would not be able to sense its existence. After a while, Murong Yu had already arrived near the fixed soul beast. However, Murong Yu didn't see any soul-stabilizing beasts. This fellow must have set up a seal nearby to prevent others from spying. Murong Yu carefully approached the fixed soul beast that he sensed. Whoosh! Layers of ripples appeared in the void, and Murong Yu's figure disappeared into the tunnel. Murong Yu felt the scene in front of him change, and in the next moment, the fixed soul beast appeared in front of him. The seal could not stop it at all. At this moment, the fixed soul beast was lying on the ground sleeping. This must be the fixed soul beast cultivation method. Its body was seriously injured. It must have been attacked by the swarm of bees. Even the fixed soul beast's soul was shaken. Fixed soul, holy soul slash. Holy soul slash. Without any hesitation, Muronyu directly used his most powerful soul attack. At the same time, he waved his hands repeatedly, and one seal after another shrouded the fixed soul beast. In fact, he had already taken out his weapon fragments and slashed wildly at the fixed soul beast. The fixed soul beast was indeed a powerful Genesis realm ferocious beast. As soon as Murongyu's attack appeared, it was awakened. Then, it let out a furious roar with the effect of fixed soul. Roar. Muronyu also let out an earth-shattering roar. Rip! The two roars collided, and the void was torn apart like a piece of cloth. However, it was obvious that Murongyu's roar was not as powerful as the fixed soul beast's. Whoosh! Murongyu's figure flashed, and he disappeared from the spot. At this moment, his soul attack and weapon fragments had already bombarded the fixed soul beast. And because Muronyu had launched a sneak attack, the fixed soul beast only had time to let out a furious roar before its soul was hit. Although Murongyu's fixed soul did not have much effect on it, it still had some effect. Poof! The weapon fragments swept past the fixed soul beast's body, bringing out a spray of blood and half of the fixed soul beast's body. And Murongyu's holy soul slash bombarded the fixed soul beast's soul fiercely. The bombardment caused the fixed soul beast's soul to become dizzy. Muronyu took a step forward and reappeared in front of the fixed soul beast, and an extremely violent attack was launched again. Fixed soul attack. Weapon fragments. 9 syllables of truth. Almost instantly, Muronyu bombarded the fixed soul beast with all his combat power. The fixed soul beast was already severely injured. At this moment, under Murongyu's barrage of attacks, it did not even have a chance to retaliate. Finally, the fixed soul beast let out a wail, and its soul was already shattered by Muronyu. Muronyu moved like lightning and directly sealed the fixed soul beast's soul. In the end, he grabbed the soul-fixing beast's body and disappeared from where he stood in the blink of an eye. Chapter 2071. An enormous amount of memories rushed into Murongyu's memories like a torrent. These memories were the memories of the second soul-fixed beast. It was obvious that this soul-bound beast had lived much longer than the first soul-bound beast. Therefore, its memories were dozens of times more than the first soul-bound beast. However, after removing some useless memories, there are not many memories left. Muronyu valued the soul-fixed ability the most. Comparing the two, his soul-fixed ability had improved by leaps and bounds. There was another aspect that made Muronyu vigilant. The rest of the soul-fixed beasts had been mobilized. They had even entered the real cave residence of the celestial being. At this time, they were probably traversing through a maze. Comparing the memories of this soul-fixed beast, Muronyu found gloomily that although this soul-fixed beast was much stronger than the first one, it was still at the bottom of the soul-fixed beast family. In other words, if Muronyu encountered another soul-fixed beast, then those soul-fixed beasts would be much stronger than this one. Muronyu did not care so much. He had already offended it. If the soul-fixed beasts dared to cause trouble, then they would all be killed. If they could not be killed, Muronyu could only escape. With Murongyu's current strength, he was afraid that escape was the only way. Devour the soul, killing the second soul-fixed beast, besides the reason of revenge. Muronyu also wanted to get its memories and devour its soul. The soul-fixed beast's consciousness had been wiped out by Muronyu. Therefore, no accidents happened in the process. Muronyu easily devoured all of its soul. However, although this soul-fixed beast was strong, it could not help Murongyu's soul break through. Although he could not break through the realm, his soul was stronger than before. Whether it was soul-fixed or soul attack, they could not be mentioned in the same breath. A day later, Yu walked out of Hichu Luoshu and walked towards the outside of the passage. Although there was a lot of honey at the end of the tunnel. However, the honey was definitely heavily guarded. Even if Yu managed to sneak in, he probably wouldn't be able to get any benefits. It would be better to search for the treasures left behind by the Heaven Tier elite. Brat, hand over your honey. Yu hadn't walked very far when a figure jumped out from the side and fiercely said, "Let's go." Unlucky cat, you're not dead yet. Yu shouted without even looking at the other party. I'll kill you. The guy who jumped out was the extremely narcissistic panda. Hearing Yu's words and thinking about the scene of it being beaten by the bees, it suddenly became furious. With a loud roar, he pounced towards Yu. Yu faintly smiled as he took a step forward. In the next moment, his figure disappeared from where he stood. No matter how hard the giant panda searched, it couldn't find any trace of him. In the end, the giant panda gave up. Even if it was stronger than Yu's invisibility ability was too abnormal. It couldn't do anything about it. Whoosh! A black shadow tore through the void and charged towards the giant panda at an extremely fast speed. The giant panda stretched out its claws and caught the black shadow. It realized that it was a space treasure. Therefore, it used its divine consciousness to explore it. Honey. It was about the size of a pool of honey. The giant panda was suddenly overjoyed. It opened its mouth and swallowed the honey. Then, it didn't care about anything else and sat down cross-legged to cultivate. Yu revealed himself and looked at the giant panda with a speechless expression. This guy was really at ease. He actually started to cultivate here. However, the giant panda was still his friend. Therefore, he stood guard around it. After 2 hours, the giant panda slowly opened its eyes. Aha! This handsome cat is really handsome. My strength has increased a little. Yes, I can do whatever I want here. Yu looked at the giant panda with a dark expression. The giant panda's strength had increased a lot, but it didn't seem to have reached the point where it could do whatever it wanted here. Compared to Wu and the others who were at the peak of the Genesis realm, it was still far behind. However, this guy had always been narcissistic, so you couldn't be bothered with it. Kit, let's go. I'll bring you to the real cave. Don't worry, I won't get lost this time. Seeing Yu's suspicious expression, the giant panda patted its chest and said. Yu was still a little skeptical. However, he could only choose to believe this guy now. Otherwise, what other choice did he have? The giant panda didn't seem to be wrong. It brought Yu around the maze. If they encountered other beasts or people like Wu, it would bring Yu away. After walking in a maze for a full month, they finally walked out. The front suddenly opened up. It was like a paradise on earth. Green mountains and clear waters, small bridges and flowing water. Hundreds of flowers bloomed. Hundreds of birds sang. What a beautiful scene. Ha ha! I'm finally here again. The giant panda laughed loudly. It took a step forward and rushed forward. However, before it could finish being happy with a plop, it was as if it had been slapped down from the sky by a large hand. It was slapped directly into the depths of the ground. You couldn't help but laugh loudly. The scenery in front of them was beautiful, although the heaven and earth origin energy here was extremely dense. It was obvious that there was an inexplicable force enveloping the entire space. Previously, Yu wasn't sure what this force was for. However, it was extremely clear now. It suppressed flying. In other words, flying was prohibited here. The giant panda was so pleased with itself that it was directly slapped deep into the ground by that force. Pay! 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 The giant panda ate a mouthful of mud. After it got up from the ground, it kept spitting saliva. However, it didn't stop. Instead, it quickly rushed in the direction it came from. There must be something good in front that attracted this fellow. Yu's heart skipped a beat. He immediately chased after it. Although his body was special, he couldn't fly in this space. The giant panda's strength was much higher than Yu's. Hence, its speed was also very fast. It shook off Yu in an instant. When Yu turned around a mountain, he saw the giant panda again. At this moment, the giant panda was looking ahead. Its saliva was all over the ground. Morong followed the giant panda's gaze and looked over. There was nothing special in front. There was only a long green bamboo. Only this bamboo looked like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, although this bamboo was green, there was nothing special about it. Although giant pandas like to eat bamboo, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? Could it be that this planet didn't have bamboo? Morong was puzzled. He slowly walked up. "Brat, stop right there!" The giant panda suddenly shouted. Morong was shocked. Just as he was about to kick the giant panda, a figure appeared out of thin air. This gave Morong and the giant panda a fright. "Who is it?" The giant panda roared. It swung its paw at the person who appeared out of thin air. "Who dares to sneak an attack on this beauty? Watch out for my axe." A delicate voice was heard. Then, a giant axe fell from the sky and slashed at the giant panda. Morong's face darkened. When he heard this voice, he didn't need to look to know that the little lowly had appeared. One claimed to be the most handsome cat in the world. The other claimed to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Who knew what would happen when these two super narcissistic people were together? Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already exchanged a blow, and then the two of them were both sent flying. Their strength was actually on par. "Damn it! How dare you sneak an attack on this handsome cat? Do you want to die?" The giant panda was furious. It was about to rush up. On the other hand, the little lowly was also furious. "Giant panda, how dare you attack this beauty? Do you believe that I won't kill you? Look at you. You're a beauty? In this handsome cat's eyes, you're really ugly. You're a good match for that brat." The giant panda said with disdain. "I got hit." Morong's face was full of smiles. He couldn't be bothered with these two fellows. He walked to the side alone to observe the bamboo that stood out from the crowd. "Puffed, you shameless panda. You're considered ugly among the pandas. How dare you boast that you're a handsome cat? You're blinding me. You're the one who's blinding me." These two fellows didn't attack. They were actually having a war of words. At this moment, Morong's face was full of surprise. Although this bamboo looked ordinary, Morong realized that this bamboo could directly devour the chaotic energy. Although it looked green, it was filled with pure, primal chaos energy. Moreover, the chaotic energy was extremely powerful. Morong reckoned that even if he managed to refine the bamboo, his strength would still increase by a little. One could only imagine how much power this bamboo contained. This is the chaotic, primordial bamboo. It has a great effect on the unlucky cat. It should be able to increase its aptitude and talent. The little lowly's voice was heard. That's right. After the little lowly's voice, it was the giant panda's saliva. Morong turned his head, only to be blinded by what he saw. The two narcissists who were originally at loggerheads and fighting had their arms around each other's shoulders. It was as if they were old friends. They were very intimate and familiar. Birds of a feather flocked together. Morong looked up at the sky. He was speechless. He didn't know what to say. "If that's the case, why don't you eat it quickly?" The giant panda quickly shook its head. "The chaotic primordial bamboo hasn't fully matured. It's too wasteful to eat it now." "You're really not eating it? Someone's coming. I'm afraid it won't be your turn by then." Morong chuckled and pointed not far behind. At this moment, a group of people was quickly walking over. Chapter 2072. The giant panda's heart tightened. Although it was said that only the giant pandas ate bamboo, not only could the primal chaos bamboo be eaten, but it could also be used to refine tools. The origin tools refined from it would all be of the highest quality. Thus, those who came would definitely try to snatch the primal chaos bamboo after discovering it, unless they didn't recognize the primal chaos bamboo. However, among so many people, someone would definitely recognize the primal chaos bamboo. "Poor cat. Don't worry, I'll protect you." The little lowly patted the giant panda's head. At the same time, she waved her hand and tossed something out. It was a ring-shaped origin tool. It was unknown what it was used for. The ring expanded with the wind, instantly expanding to a radius of about 10 miles. Then, this enlarged ring enveloped Morong's group, as well as the primal chaos bamboo. Layers of ripples appeared in the void. Waves of power were continuously emitted from the ring, directly forming a power shield around the area, protecting Muron-Yu and the others. The little lowly clapped her hands. All right, those people won't be a threat to us anymore. However, the giant panda's heart didn't relax. After all, it didn't know whether the ring the little lowly took out had any use or not. Among those people outside, there was no lack of Genesis tier elites. In fact, there was even one who had reached the peak of the Genesis tier. The people who came were the Stellar Luna sect and the sect leaders of the Stellar Luna sect, both of whom were at the peak of the Genesis tier. Very quickly, the people of the Stellar Luna sect arrived outside the ring. They were blocked by the ring and couldn't advance any further. The people of the Stellar Luna sect all looked at Muron-Yu and the others. The little lowly's act of revealing her intentions was too obvious. Wasn't this telling the people of the Stellar Luna sect that they had treasures here? At the start, even the sect leader of the Stellar Luna sect didn't discover what good things were inside the power shield, until a disciple of the Stellar Luna sect told him, "Sect leader, that bamboo should be the primal chaos bamboo. If it's used to refine tools, it should be able to refine a heaven-tier origin tool," a disciple of the Stellar Luna sect said to the sect leader in surprise after recognizing the primal chaos bamboo. The eyes of the Stellar Luna sect's sect leader flickered. This was good stuff. If he had a celestial tier origin tool that he had refined himself, his strength would definitely skyrocket. Even if he was still no match for a celestial tier elite, it would definitely not be easy for a celestial tier elite to kill him. It would be much easier for him to defeat Mo Wu and the others. Kill. Although the Star Luna sect was one of the top 10 forces in the Devil Ceiling Galaxy, it had never been a good thing. Just as the sect leader of the Star Luna sect was deep in thought, a disciple of the Star Luna sect had already made his move. Boom! The punch landed heavily on the energy emitted by the ring. The huge force collided with the power of the ring, creating a layer of ripples. But that was it. Soon, the ripples dissipated. However, the ring remained unmoved. Seeing this, the giant panda's anxious heart relaxed. However, Muron-Yu's heart skipped a beat. The strength of this Stellar Luna sect's disciple wasn't that great. Among the Stellar Luna sect's disciples, there were many who were stronger than him. Moreover, Xingyu, who was at the peak of the Genesis tier, hadn't made his move yet. If Xingyu or all of them attacked at the same time, how long could this ring last? And the chaotic primordial bamboo didn't look like it could mature in a short time. The situation was critical. Boom, boom, boom. The Stellar Luna sect disciples weren't good people. They didn't care about their status as a large sect. After the first disciple's attack failed, more disciples made their move. One after another, powerful forces bombarded the protective shield crazily. The shield trembled violently. Although the shield still showed no signs of breaking, Muron-Yu realized that the ring's energy was being depleted faster. If this continued, it wouldn't be able to last for too long. The little lowly's face darkened, and she looked very unhappy. Damn it, there's not enough energy. Giant Panda, I might not be able to protect you anymore. The giant panda looked at the Star Luna sect's disciples outside, then at the chaotic primordial bamboo. He looked hesitant. Even if the chaotic primordial bamboo hadn't fully matured, if it was snatched away, it might as well eat it. Although the effects wouldn't be good after it matured, it was better than nothing, right? Seeing that the ring couldn't hold on any longer, the giant panda finally decided to make its move. However, just as its claws reached out to grab the primal chaos primordial bamboo, its claws were grabbed by a large hand. Kid, are you trying to snatch my chaotic primordial bamboo? The giant panda glared at Muron-Yu with a murderous look. If Muron-Yu really wanted to snatch the chaotic primordial bamboo, even if they were friends, they would fall out with him. Muron-Yu rolled his eyes. To be honest, the chaotic primordial bamboo wasn't attractive to him at all. He just suddenly thought of a way. Wasn't the chaotic primordial bamboo not fully matured yet? Then he would think of a way to accelerate its ripening. You can accelerate the ripening of the chaotic primordial bamboo. The giant panda looked at Muron-Yu suspiciously. It didn't believe that Murong Yu had the ability. That was the chaotic primordial bamboo. Only the little lowly looked at Murong Yu with a strange light in her eyes. The chaotic primordial bamboo grew by absorbing the power of chaos, while Murong Yu had the chaotic celestial body. If there was anyone who could accelerate the ripening of the chaotic primordial bamboo, that person would definitely be Murong Yu. If I say I can, would you believe me? Murong Yu laughed. Looking at Murong Yu's confident smile, the giant panda was a little hesitant. Although it still didn't believe it, it had to give it a try. If Murong Yu couldn't accelerate the ripening of the chaotic primordial bamboo, it wouldn't be too late for it to eat it. Murong Yu smiled faintly and walked to the front of the chaotic primordial bamboo. Accelerating the ripening of the chaotic primordial bamboo was actually an idea that flashed through his mind. He wasn't sure whether it would work or not. Sect Master, they want to take the chaotic primordial bamboo. Seeing that Murong Yu's hands were slowly reaching for the chaotic primordial bamboo, everyone from Star Luna's sect tensed up. A cold light flashed across Xing Yu's eyes. He would never allow Murong Yu to snatch the chaotic primordial bamboo away. Therefore, he attacked. He threw out a punch directly. Boom! After a deafening sound, the energy shield formed by the ring shook violently. In fact, Murong Yu even heard a creaking sound coming from the energy shield. However, the energy shield didn't shake at all. Xing Yu frowned slightly and threw another punch. The energy shield still didn't shake. However, Murong Yu clearly saw that the energy of the energy shield was greatly depleted. If this continued, the energy shield wouldn't be able to last for a day. In other words, Murong Yu only had half a day at most. If he couldn't accelerate the ripening of the chaotic primordial bamboo after half a day, he would take the chaotic primordial bamboo and escape. At this moment, his hands were already on the chaotic primordial bamboo. With a thought, an enormous amount of chaotic energy rolled out from his hands like raging waves and surged into the chaotic primordial bamboo. Whoosh! After receiving Murong Yu's enormous and pure chaotic energy, the chaotic primordial bamboo, which was originally calm, started to shake violently and thousands of branches started to dance in the air. Murong Yu even saw the chaotic primordial bamboo growing taller slowly. It worked. Seeing this, the giant panda couldn't help but exclaim, "Big baddie, my energy shield can only last for half a day at most." Little Loli's anxious voice rang in Murong Yu's mind. "Half a day is enough," Murong Yu replied. Initially, the chaotic primordial bamboo only had 7 sections. However, in such a short time, it had already grown by half a section. Although Murong Yu didn't understand the chaotic primordial bamboo, he knew that 9 was the limit between heaven and earth. A 9-section chaotic primordial bamboo should be its mature state. Right at this moment, a miserable shriek suddenly rang out from the Star Luna sect disciples who were attacking the energy barrier outside. The Stellar Luna sect, Murong Yu, and the others were all shocked and turned to look. They saw a Stellar Luna sect disciple lying on the ground lifelessly. Soul-stabilizing beast. Murong Yu's heart sank. Originally, he was focused on the chaotic primordial bamboo and didn't pay attention to the outside world. Now that he looked, he immediately sensed the presence of the soul-stabilizing beast. And there was more than one. When it rains, it pours. The Stellar Luna sect disciples were hard to deal with, and now there was the soul-stabilizing beast. Fortunately, the soul-stabilizing beast didn't seem to be on good terms with the Stellar Luna sect disciples and started to attack directly. Kill them. The Stellar Luna sect disciples seemed to know of the soul-stabilizing beast's existence, and someone shouted immediately. Instantly, an incomparably violent power poured out, covering a large area and attacking indiscriminately. Murong Yu and the other 2 heaved a sigh of relief. Due to the soul-stabilizing beast, the Stellar Luna sect temporarily stopped attacking the energy shield. It's best if they all perish together. The giant panda laughed coldly. Unlucky cat, you're so evil. Little Loli looked at the giant panda with disdain. Don't tell me you don't think so. The giant panda looked at little Lowly with disdain. Unlucky cat, knows me well. Little Lowly patted the giant panda's shoulder and laughed evilly. Murong Yu's face darkened. This pair of birds of a feather made him speechless. However, he couldn't be bothered with these two idiots. Under his hard work, the 8th segment of the chaotic primordial bamboo had completely grown. At this moment, he was working hard towards the 9th segment. However, when the chaotic primordial bamboo reached the 9th segment, the amount of chaotic energy required became extremely large. The tree of life in Murong Yu's dantian trembled slightly. The millions of roots that had taken root in the endless primal chaos danced wildly as they absorbed the boundless primal chaos energy. In the end, they transformed the energy into pure primal chaos energy and poured into Murong Yu's body. With the support of the tree of life, the chaotic primordial bamboo also grew rapidly. Chapter 2073. At this rate of growth, it wouldn't take long for the 9th segment of the primal chaos bamboo to fully mature. But right now, Murong Yu and the others were both happy and worried. They were happy because the primal chaos bamboo was growing well. They were worried because other than the Star Luna sect and the soul-stabilizing beast, the people from the demon-sealing sect had also arrived. As these people continued to appear, one could imagine that the top 10 forces and other forces would also appear one after another. If these people joined forces to attack, the little Lowly's ring wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Now, they could only do their best and leave the rest to fate. If they really couldn't, they could only take the primal chaos bamboo and escape. Otherwise, with their strength, they wouldn't be a match for Mo Wu and the others at all. However, fortunately, the soul-stabilizing beast treated all the cultivators as Murong Yu's accomplices and attacked indiscriminately. However, these soul-stabilizing beasts wouldn't be able to hold on for long under the attacks of Star Luna and Mo Wu, who were at the peak of the creation realm. As expected, Star Luna and Mo Wu joined forces and attacked aggressively. Those soul-stabilizing beasts couldn't hold on and were quickly beaten back. Now, Murong Yu was facing two of the top 10 forces, the Star Luna sect and the Demon Sealing sect. Not only did these two sects have many powerhouses, but they also had peak creation realm existences. Unless a heaven realm powerhouse appeared now, no one would be able to withstand their combined attacks. Big bad guy, tragedy is about to happen. Let's take the primal chaos bamboo quickly and escape. Facing Mo Wu and Star Luna, even the battle-hungry little Lowly was so scared that she wanted to escape. The giant panda also nodded repeatedly. This level of powerhouse wasn't something it could fight against. Okay, Murong Yu immediately agreed. This wasn't his character. The little Lowly thought that Murong Yu wouldn't agree. With her understanding of Murong Yu wouldn't make such a choice unless it was the last moment. However, the little Lowly reacted very quickly. She saw that Star Luna and Mo Wu were already preparing to attack outside the energy barrier. The ring was unable to withstand the attacks of these two super powerhouses. It was shattered in an instant. It was no wonder Murong Yu had agreed so readily. With a thought, Murong Yu summoned the Hichu Luoshu and was about to take the little Lowly and the giant panda into it. At the same time, he grabbed the primal chaos primal bamboo with both hands and was about to uproot it. Wong. At this moment, before Murong Yu could do anything, a layer of ripples suddenly appeared in the void where they were. At the same time, a terrifying pressure rolled over from afar like a torrent. Plop, 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 outside the ring, other than Mo Wu, Xingyu, and Xingyu. The rest of the Demon Sealing sect and Stellar Luna sect disciples immediately knelt down. Some even prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling. Even Mo Wu and Xingyu paled. They turned to look behind them in shock and anger. A frightening pressure descended on Murong Yu's body, causing his soul to tremble violently. What a terrifying pressure. This should be the existence of the celestial realm, right? Murong Yu was shocked. However, he circulated his strength to the limit and resisted the impact of the pressure with all his might. Pressure, other than being a physical attack, was more of an attack on one's mind. The stronger the mental strength, the weaker the effect of the pressure. For example, Moron Yu's mental strength and willpower were extremely strong. Because of this, he was able to withstand this pressure. However, it was only temporary. Plop. However, although Moron Yu could resist the pressure temporarily, the giant panda did not have as strong a mental strength and willpower as he did. He was immediately forced to kneel down. Only the little loli stood where she was as if nothing had happened. A faint fluorescent light was emitted from her body, enveloping her entire body. It should be the fluorescent light that blocked the pressure. Therefore, she acted as if nothing had happened. Whoosh! After suppressing most of the people on the ground, a figure appeared out of thin air above Moron Yu and the others. It was a young man who looked to be about 28 or 29 years old, with an evil smile on his face. A celestial realm expert. Moron Yu could clearly see that the power radiating from this person was more than 100 times stronger than Mo Wu and Xing Yu. In other words, 100 Xing Yu and Mo Wu together might not be a match for this young man. Then this young man was a celestial realm expert. There were only 10 celestial realm experts in the Milky Way star zone. Then this person was one of the 10? The young man with the evil smile glanced at Mo Wu and Xing Yu. At that time, his face was indifferent and there was no change. However, when his gaze stopped on Moron Yu and the little loli, his expression changed. Moron Yu is only a level 1 insight realm cultivator. There was a gap of 2 realms between them. How could he resist his pressure? Although it was very difficult for him to resist. As long as he continued to release a bit more pressure, he could suppress Moron Yu. However, Moron Yu's performance still made him look at him in a new light. This was really magical. Moron Yu only made the young man feel a little surprised. It was not to the extent that his expression changed. What made his expression change was the little loli. He could clearly feel that when his aura reached the little loli's side, it was diverted to the other side by the faint fluorescent light. It did not affect the little loli at all. She was at least a level 2 celestial realm existence. Otherwise, even a level 1 celestial realm expert would not be able to resist his pressure with just the power of light. However, there were only a few level 1 celestial realm experts in the Milky Way star zone. How could there be a level 2 celestial realm expert? In other words, this woman should be from another star zone. Moreover, her background was quite strong. I wonder if the expert behind her is in this secret realm. This thought suddenly flashed through the young man's mind. His bewildered eyes kept sweeping past the little loli. Haha, I'm Skeleton. I'm just passing by. I'm sorry to disturb Mississippi. The young man suddenly laughed and landed on the ground. Then he bowed to the little loli. Moron Yu was almost scared to the point of peeing. This guy was Skeleton? Skeleton was not one of the top 10 celestial realm experts in the Milky Way star zone. Then, if this person did not come from another star zone, then he must be the leader of the Skeleton Bandits. In other words, the Milky Way auction house lost the previous battle. The celestial realm inheritance was snatched by the Skeleton Bandits. And the leader of the Skeleton Bandits took this opportunity to break through and become the 11th celestial realm expert in the Milky Way star zone. Moron Yu and the Skeleton Bandits had a huge grudge. Once this skeleton found out, would he reward him with a slap? And with Moron Yu's current strength, he would definitely not be able to withstand a slap from the skeleton. The little loli only looked at the skeleton indifferently and did not speak. She had a very arrogant look. The skeleton did not say anything and only laughed dryly. He had just broken through to the celestial realm, and his cultivation had not even stabilized. Moreover, he did not have any celestial realm foundation. It was because of this that he came to this secret realm and wanted to swallow all the treasures of the celestial realm expert. Therefore, he definitely did not dare to fight against the expert behind the little loli. Therefore, he bowed and was about to leave. I see that Miss seems to be in trouble. Do you mind if I help you? Before leaving, the skeleton said and then looked at Mo Wu, Xing Yu, and the rest with murderous eyes. Mo Wu, Xing Yu, and the rest were instantly enveloped by a terrifying aura of death. Boom! Boom! Without any hesitation, they detonated their strongest origin tool and temporarily canceled out the skeleton's pressure. In the next moment, they turned into a stream of light and tore through the void, flying into the distance. However, as they were leaving, they stared at Murongyu with resentment. This made Murongyu speechless. He did not do anything, so what did it have to do with him? Boom! At the same time, when Mo Wu and Xingyu moved, the skeleton also attacked. With a slap, it slapped down. After an earth-shattering explosion, Xingyu's sect, Demon Sealing Sect, and the few soul-stabilizing beasts were already shattered into dust before they could even react. Other than Mo Wu and Xingyu, the people from the two forces were all dead. This skeleton was truly vicious and merciless. The people from Demon Sealing Sect and Star Luna Sect did not have any grudges with him. However, in order to please the little lowly, he killed them directly. If Mo Wu and Xingyu did not escape quickly, the two of them would have died without a doubt. You guys ran fast. The skeleton sneered in disdain. If he chased after them, he might be able to kill the two of them. However, he felt that there was no need for that. Those two people have been injured by me, so they shouldn't be a threat to you for a while. I'll take my leave first. The skeleton bowed to the little lowly, then took a step and disappeared. It's over. Mo Wu and Xingyu must hate me to death. Murongyu mumbled gloomily. He couldn't understand why Mo Wu and Xingyu would hate him. Was it because the skeleton was too powerful, the little lowly's background was too scary, and the giant panda was not a cultivator? There's a heaven realm cultivator here. You scared me to death. After a long time, the little lowly seemed to have returned to her senses. She wiped away a drop of cold sweat on her forehead and said with lingering fear, "You're afraid of a heaven realm cultivator?" Murongyu glared at the little lowly, then turned around to continue ripening the chaotic primordial bamboo. Otherwise, if Mo Wu and Xingyu came back without a good person like the skeleton to help them, they would definitely be in trouble. Kid, hurry up and ripen the chaotic primordial bamboo. Damn it, it's too dangerous here. I don't want to stay here any longer. The giant panda came back to his senses and cursed. Chapter 2074. Without the disturbance of Mo Wu, Xingyu, and the soul-anchoring beast, Murongyu focused on ripening the chaotic primordial bamboo. Thus, the chaotic primordial bamboo grew at a rapid pace. Perhaps Mo Wu and Xingyu escaped due to their heavy injuries, or perhaps Skeleton's celestial realm power was still lingering. In the following period, no one or beast approached. 2 hours after Skeleton and the others left, the 9th segment of the chaotic primordial bamboo was finally fully grown. At this time, the mature chaotic primordial bamboo turned from its original green appearance to a patch of black. It was completely black, and even the bamboo leaves were black. However, this black color was not like charcoal, but was filled with traces of light. Even if a mortal saw it, they would feel that this bamboo was extraordinary. Ah, it's finally ripened. Kid, thank you. After Murong, you let go of the chaotic primordial bamboo. The giant panda laughed and rushed forward. In the blink of an eye, the chaotic primordial bamboo was uprooted by the giant panda. Then, the giant panda opened its big mouth and bit down with a caw-caw sound. Although the chaotic primordial bamboo was extraordinary, it was just like ordinary bamboo and was easily eaten clean by the giant panda. There's nothing special about the chaotic primordial bamboo. It doesn't even have the fragrance of ordinary bamboo. The giant panda patted its big belly and said irritatingly, "Is that so?" Little Lolita's eyes flashed with a dangerous aura as she stared at the giant panda. Perhaps it was because the giant panda recalled the scene of Skeleton and little Lolita. It could not help but shudder and quickly said, "It's just a joke, just a joke. After eating the chaotic primordial bamboo, it will gradually change my physique." It seemed that the chaotic primordial bamboo worked slowly and did not have an immediate effect. Therefore, Moron, you wanted to continue forward. However, the giant panda pulled him back. Kid, you still want to go deeper? The giant panda shuddered. Now that it had obtained the chaotic primordial bamboo that it had always wanted, it really did not want to go deeper when it thought of Skeleton's horror. Coward! Little Lolita looked at the giant panda with disdain and then walked away. Moron, you did not say anything. He just broke free from the giant panda and continued forward. He had been knitting all his life. If he stopped just because there was a heaven-tier elite in front of him, it would not be his character at all. Most of the time, being strong did not necessarily mean that one could obtain treasures. Although Moron, you did not think that he was that virtuous person, he believed in his luck. You two bastards, this handsome cat will be killed by you sooner or later. Forget it, forget it. I'll sacrifice my life to accompany the ugly. The giant panda looked up at the sky and let out 3 long sighs. Then, it spread out and followed behind Moron and the other man. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after, a series of loud noises came from the front. Waves of aura surged from the front like stormy waves. From afar, an incomparably huge palace appeared in front of them. The loud noise came from that hall. They can actually enter that hall? The giant panda seemed to be very familiar with this place, and his face was full of confusion. Unlucky cat, can't we enter that hall in the past? The little lowly could not help but ask. Of course not. That hall is covered by layers of formations and restrictions. Not to mention entering, we can't even get close to it. The giant panda blurted out. At this time, it did not hide anything. Therefore, it told him everything it knew about the palace. This hall was the real cave abode of the Heaven-tier elite. However, because it had never entered, the giant panda had no idea what was going on inside. After all, the other party is only at the Heaven-tier, and Skeleton is also at the Heaven-tier. Therefore, the formations and restrictions left behind by that person are unable to stop Skeleton at all. But who is Skeleton fighting with inside? Could it be that a second Heaven-tier elite has appeared? Moron frowned slightly and muttered to himself in his heart. Moron was able to easily identify the skeleton's aura amidst the shock waves of energy that resembled stormy waves. At this time, Skeleton's aura was much stronger than before. Skeleton was fighting, which meant that his opponent was at least at the Heaven-tier. The other cultivators have also come over. The little lowly looked around and found that many people were like them, hiding in the distance of the palace. Under the vibration of the aura of the 2 skeletons, all of them trembled, and no one dared to approach the hall. Even Qian Yao, a peak creation realm elite, did not dare to approach. After all, there was a huge gap between the peak creation realm and the Heaven-tier. Just like Mo Wu and Xingyu, they could only run. Bang! All of a sudden, a black shadow flew out from the entrance of the hall. After this black shadow flew out, its figure flipped in the void and then turned into a stream of light that shot into the distance, instantly disappearing from everyone's sight. It's Skeleton. What's in the hall? Moron face revealed a shocked expression. Obviously, Skeleton was beaten out by someone. Moreover, Skeleton ran away almost without hesitation. At the same time, his face revealed a look of fear. What kind of existence could make Skeleton feel fear? After the skeletons fled, the entire area became quiet. Silence reigned. Although the door of the hall was not closed, no one dared to use their divine sense to investigate. Even Skeleton had run away. How could they dare to enter the hall? However, this was clearly the real cave abode of that Heaven-tier elite. There might be the inheritance and various treasures of that Heaven-tier elite. If they were asked to leave just like that, they would be somewhat unwilling. After half a day, finally, a cultivator could not help but extend his divine sense. Just as his divine sense spread into the main hall, he let out a roar. Then, his figure smashed through the void and charged straight into the palace. Before the others could react, his figure had already disappeared from the hall. Bang! 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 After the 3 loud noises, the hall fell into silence again, and that cultivator never came out again. Obviously, That person had been killed. Everyone became more and more frightened. But no one left. The weirder the haul was, the greater the harvest. Of course, the premise was that you could gain something. F***CK. Luckily, we couldn't enter the hall before, or this handsome cat would be in trouble. The giant panda patted his chest and said with lingering fear, this fellow had snuck in here more than once, but he had never been able to enter the hall. Otherwise, it would be a problem whether or not he still existed. Kid, let's go. Instead of wasting our time here, we might as well go get some honey. Hee hee. The giant panda laughed sinisterly and was about to pull Murong-yu away. Step back a little. I want to go in and take a look. Murong-yu, who had been looking at the hall silently, suddenly said, Are you crazy? The little lowly and the giant panda immediately exclaimed, Don't worry, I won't risk my life. As he spoke, a power clone appeared in front of the giant panda and the little lowly. Murong-yu's original body took a step forward and rushed straight into the Hichu Luo Shu. Are you two going to enter my treasure space or stay here? Let's enter the treasure space. The giant panda blurted out without hesitation. This place was full of danger, so it was safer to enter the treasure space. The little lowly naturally knew the uses of the Hichu Luo Shu, so she also entered the treasure space. Whoosh! After they entered the He-Tu and Luo Shu, Murong-yu's strength incarnation turned into a ray of light. It tore through the void and charged straight into the main hall. You're courting death. Seeing Murong-yu rush over, the surrounding people looked at him with disdain and sneered. As soon as Murong-yu's power clone rushed into the hall, he saw a middle-aged man standing not far in front of him. I am Ta-ing. Defeat me, and you will receive my inheritance. Otherwise die. A thunderous voice exploded from the middle-aged man's mouth, causing Murong-yu's power clone to sway slightly. At the same time, the middle-aged man had already made his move. He took a step forward and rushed to Murong-yu's side. With a thought, Murong-yu was about to take a step forward and break away from the other party's attack. But something happened that shocked him. His physical body only swayed, and as if he'd been nailed to the ground, he did not move at all. It was not a seal, nor was it confinement, and it was even more so not time freezing. There were no traces of these at all. However, fortunately, Murong-yu's hands and power could still be used, so he exploded with a strong power and clashed with the middle-aged man. Boom, boom, boom. The middle-aged man's strength was not strong. He was only at the 4th level of the Genesis tier, which was a minor level higher than Murong-yu's battle prowess. The other party should have suppressed his strength. Otherwise, with his battle prowess, how could he defeat the skeleton? It was as if his feet had been nailed to the ground, and he could not move at all. Thus, Murong-yu became a target. No matter how strong he was no match for the middle-aged man in a situation where he could not move. After a few dozen moves, Murong-yu's power clone directly exploded. The great hall fell silent again. Big baddie, how is it? What's the situation inside? Little lowly immediately asked with concern. There seems to be only one person inside. Murong-yu told them everything he had seen. So strange? Little lowly and the giant panda frowned, and Murong-yu was also puzzled. He still did not know how his power clone had been fixed. Strictly speaking, it was not fixed, but as if the feet had taken root, firmly nailed to the ground. However, Murong-yu did not discover anything special with a single thought. A second energy clone was formed once again. Chapter 2075. With a sway of his body, Murong-yu's energy clone charged into the main hall once again. What's going on? Seeing Murong-yu enter again, the surrounding crowd immediately went into an uproar. But very quickly, they came to their senses. If Murong-yu could think of using his energy clone to enter, why couldn't they? They could do it too. After coming to their senses, each of their figures shook and transformed into an energy clone that charged into the main hall. In an instant, countless figures rushed into the main hall. Could there really be some treasure inside? In Hichu Luo Shu, the giant panda jumped up and looked eager to try. However, The little lowly was unusually quiet and did not have the intention to enter the main hall to investigate. Big scoundrel, how's your doppelganger? The little lowly ignored the restless giant panda and looked at Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu shook his head. This time was exactly the same as the first time. He lasted a little longer than the first time and still did not gain anything. He did not even notice how the person called Shadow Step stopped him. I suggest that you all go in and take a look, Murong-Yu said. Anyway, even if his energy clone was killed, he would only lose some energy. It was not a big deal. And if more people went in, they might gain something. The giant panda was already restless. Hearing this, it immediately transformed into an energy clone and rushed out of Hichu Luoshu into the main hall. The little lowly hesitated for a moment, then transformed into an energy clone. However, the three of them were very careful. Previously, a cultivator was pulled into the main hall. Although there was no owner of the energy clone in the main hall now, there was nothing wrong with being careful. Whoosh! Murong-Yu's third energy clone entered the main hall. The main hall was exactly the same as the previous 2 times he entered. The things inside did not change. Of course, he did not see any energy clones of other cultivators. So many energy clones had entered the main hall. It was impossible that all of them were killed. Therefore, Murong-Yu guessed that the main hall was another space. Everyone who entered the main hall was separated into different spaces. Damn, you even dare to destroy this handsome cat's energy clone. See if I don't destroy you. At this moment, the giant panda flew into a rage and cursed in Hichu Luoshu. After a while, the little lowly shook her head. Her energy clone had also been destroyed. What's going on? Murong-Yu asked. From the giant panda and the little lowly's answers, Murong-Yu realized that they had encountered the same thing as him. However, they did not gain anything. The ability of Shadow Step's ability was too strange. If that person obtained it, that person's strength would definitely increase by several times. Even Murong-Yu's heart was moved. Moreover, the loss of his energy clones. Therefore, Murong's energy clones continuously. Aside from Murong-Yu, everyone else was the same. So that's how it is. Murong-Yu's energy clone looked at the shadow step in front of him in shock. In reality, Murong-Yu was not looking at the shadow step, but at the foot of the shadow step. At this moment, the shadow step's feet were firmly stepping on Murong-Yu's shadow. Shadow step, so this was shadow step. There was nothing special about stepping on shadow. The key was that Murong-Yu realized that when his shadow was stepped on, his body could not move. A shadow was ultimately a shadow, and not something substantial. No matter how you attacked the shadow, it would not affect the main body. Moreover, as long as the main body was there, no matter what kind of attack the shadow received, it would not change, unless the place where the shadow was projected changed. However, the essence of the shadow was still the same. Only with the main body would there be a shadow. If you wanted the shadow to change, you would have to hurt the main body. This was irreversible. This was the innate understanding of mortals and cultivators in the endless starry sky. However, the scene that Murong-Yu witnessed today had toppled his understanding of the world. The shadow and the main body were reversed. Since the other party could step on the shadow and control the main body, then could the other party attack the shadow and then hurt the main body? This thought appeared in Murong-Yu's mind, and the shadow step quickly gave him an answer. The shadow step glanced at Murong-Yu, and then chopped at the arm of Murong-Yu's shadow. With a PU, the arm of Murong-Yu's shadow was directly chopped off. At the same time, the arm of his energy clone was also chopped off. It was actually possible. Murong-Yu was indescribably shocked and wanted to break free. However, Murong-Yu's shadow step continued to attack, causing Murong-Yu's shadow to explode. Naturally, Murong-Yu's energy clone also fell. What kind of technique is this? It's actually so heaven-defying. In some ways, it's even more heaven-defying than the chaotic celestial records. It's even more heaven-defying than the primal chaos celestial body. Murong-Yu was still in shock. After a long time, Murong-Yu came back to his senses. Although this divine shadow technique was heaven-defying, it was not at the same level as the chaotic celestial records and chaotic celestial records. Just like Murongyu, as long as he didn't die prematurely, he could become the master of chaos. Once he became the master of chaos, he could control the entire chaos. So what if the divine shadow technique was heaven-defying? It couldn't do anything to the master of chaos. Moreover, the weakness of the divine shadow technique was quite obvious. When facing an expert, so what if you stepped on his shadow? Even if the opponent stood still and let you attack, you might not be able to kill him. Moreover, Murongyu didn't believe that the divine shadow technique could stop an expert who was several realms stronger than the user. Most importantly, the divine shadow technique only targeted shadows. But what if the opponent didn't have a shadow? Then wouldn't this technique be completely useless? Of course, it was impossible for a person to not have a shadow. But in the darkness, wouldn't there be no shadow? Of course, as the attacker, it was very easy for them to create light and thus create shadows. However, the opponent could also extinguish these lights. These were the weaknesses of the divine shadow technique. Of course, the divine shadow technique was still heaven-defying. If Murongyu cultivated this technique, he was confident that he could even kill an expert at the peak of the Genesis tier. Thus, he was determined to obtain this divine shadow technique. Didn't they say that if he defeated the Step of Shadows, he would be able to obtain his inheritance? Then I'll defeat him. Murongyu's eyes flashed, and thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. The Step of Shadows should also be a power clone, and in the large hall, it would always be a minor realm higher than the intruder. If he only relied on his power clone, Murongyu wouldn't be able to defeat the Step of Shadows. Then, if he wanted to defeat the Step of Shadows, he would have to use his true body. When Murongyu told the little lowly and the giant panda about his discovery, the two of them were immediately stunned, especially the little lowly. The more terrifying one's background was, the more they knew. When they learned about the divine shadow technique, they were even more shocked. However, when they learned that Murongyu wanted to use his true body to defeat the Step of Shadows, they immediately stopped Murongyu. You can choose to remain in my treasure, or you can choose to leave. After Murongyu made a decision, he couldn't be swayed. Not to mention the little lowly, even Zhao Jiqing and the others couldn't be swayed. Moreover, Murongyu's main spirit would always be in the Hichu Luo Shu, so he wouldn't be so stupid as to throw his life away. Since that's the case, then I'll also go in with you, the little lowly said through gritted teeth, as if she had made a decision. F***CK. The two of you will kill this handsome cat sooner or later. Once this handsome cat dies, how many female pandas will be heartbroken? The giant panda looked at Murongyu with grief and indignation, as if it was about to die. Don't worry, as long as you don't leave my treasure space, you won't die, Murongyu said to the little lowly. Without Murongyu's permission, the giant panda couldn't leave Hichu Luo Shu. However, the little lowly could. Thus, he said this mainly to the little lowly. Brat, you can't die. If you die, we can only stay in your treasure space for the rest of our lives, and we won't be able to leave that damned hall, the giant panda said with grief and indignation. Murongyu sent the giant panda flying with a kick. In Hichu Luo Shu, even if the giant panda was stronger than him, he could still beat it up if he wanted to, because he was the ruler here. After everything was prepared, Murongyu's main body left Hichu Luo Shu and appeared at the entrance of the hall. After taking a deep breath, Murongyu stepped out and charged into the hall. Shua! The scene in the hall was exactly the same. No, it was a bit different. In the past, when his clone entered here, Taing would say the exact same thing. I am Taing. If you defeat me, you can obtain my inheritance. Otherwise, you will die. But now, Taing didn't say this. He only looked at Murongyu indifferently. After a while, he slowly said, Brat, you finally have the courage to enter with your main body? Those who enter with their clones are all cowards. They won't be able to defeat me. And you're the first one to have the courage to enter with your main body after knowing the situation here. I admire your foolish actions, but there is only one outcome for you, and that is death, unless you can defeat me. But let me tell you, that is impossible. Murong Yu's face darkened. When did this guy become so talkative? Once he started talking, he wouldn't stop. Moreover, he was mocking and ridiculing him. It really made him speechless. Moreover, was this guy really dead or was he still alive? I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Not only will I not die, but I will also defeat you and obtain your inheritance. Murong Yu laughed coldly. He took a step forward and took the initiative to throw a punch. His clone had been in here for so long and had always been on the passive side. Moreover, he kept getting killed, so he had a stomach full of anger. Chapter 2076. Step Shadow's figure flashed, and it dodged Murong Yu's attack. It took a step forward and was about to step on Murong Yu's shadow. Once Murong Yu's shadow was stepped on, he would be immobilized, and he would be powerless to reverse the situation. After being killed by Step Shadow so many times before, how could Murong Yu not learn to be smart? At the same time that Step Shadow's figure flashed, his figure also rapidly retreated backward. During this process, vicious beasts of various shapes and sizes continuously appeared around Murong Yu. Following this, these vicious beasts bared their fangs and brandished their claws, releasing a terrifying pressure as they charged towards Step Shadow. In the blink of an eye, the entire large hall was filled with tens of thousands of vicious beasts. These were the creatures that Murong Yu had created. All of them had the strength of the second level of the Genesis realm. They were only one level weaker than Murong Yu's original body. Step Shadow's strength was only at the fourth level of the Genesis realm, and there was a difference of 2 levels between it and the creatures that Murong Yu had created. Their strength was like a natural chasm. However, although the creatures that Murong Yu had created weren't very strong, they had the advantage of numbers. The densely packed creatures filled the entire large hall. The shadows of the creatures covered the entire floor. It was impossible to tell if the shadow belonged to Murong Yu or another creature. You think that I can't do anything to you just because of this? Step Shadow's power exploded, and all the creatures that charged towards him were all sent flying. As he spoke, Step Shadow took a heavy step forward and stepped on the overlapping shadows in front of him. Wong. At this moment, Murong Yu felt that all the creatures that he had created had been immobilized. Even him, Murong Yu was indescribably shocked. As long as it's a shadow, it won't be able to escape from my attack. Step Shadow smiled proudly. Murong Yu's heart sank. That's right. Even if the shadows drowned each other's shadows, and it was impossible to tell who was whose shadow. However, these black shadows were still shadows. Countless shadows combined to form a large shadow. As long as it was a shadow, it would be affected by Step Shadow's shadow godly technique. Break for me. Step Shadow quickly pounced over as it used Step Shadow. Murong Yu felt a deep sense of danger. Thus, he let out a loud roar. At the same time, all the creatures that he had created and his original body began to struggle fiercely. Boom! A huge muffled explosion sounded out, and the shadow on the ground shook violently, causing the Step Shadow on the ground to stagger. However, the bodies of Murong Yu and the other creatures only swayed slightly. They were unable to take even half a step forward. He was still frozen and unable to move. However, Murong Yu's face revealed a smile. Because he saw hope. Break for me. At Step Shadow, S attacks attack. Step Shadows attack to attack Steps attack attacks. S is attack. Step Shadows attacks attack. Step S to attack. HH. Step Shadow was about to punch Murong Yu to death. At this moment, the weapon shard, which carried a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth, tore through the air and ruthlessly chopped toward Step Shadow's head. Tying sneered and punched the shard of the weapon. Dang! After an ear-piercing sound of metal colliding, the weapon shard was directly sent flying. Step Shadow's fist was also shattered, and his body became sluggish. At the same time, after a huge pong sound, Moronyu's body had already retreated backwards. The other creatures roared crazily and charged towards Step's shadow, wanting to kill him. You actually broke free from my stomp. Step's shadow's eyes flashed with admiration. Even Skeleton, a Heaven Realm expert, was almost killed by him, and Moronyu was only at the profound underworld realm. He couldn't help but admire him. HH. The weapon shard continuously tore through the air and wildly chopped over. As for those creatures, their shadows were once again stepped on by Step's shadow, making them unable to move. In the end, they were easily killed by Step's shadow. However, a large number of creatures were still being created. However, Moronyu retreated far away. In fact, his shadow was far away from those creatures' shadows. Otherwise, once those creatures' shadows were stepped on, even he would be frozen. No matter how big a shadow is, it's still a shadow. But what if there's no shadow? Moronyu's heart moved, and Hichu Luoshu had already been summoned. After Hichu Luoshu appeared, it grew with the wind and quickly covered the entire hall. However, what made Moronyu depressed was that Step's shadow's body exploded with a dazzling light. Where there was light, there would definitely be shadows. Unless Step's shadow was killed, the shadows would be everywhere. HH. The weapon shard froze in the air, unable to move at all. Its shadow was also stepped on by Step's shadow. This made Moronyu even more depressed. Under these circumstances, only a soul attack would be effective. However, Step's shadow was clearly just a clone of energy and did not have a soul. Thus, Moronyu's soul attack was useless. Is it really impossible to kill Step's shadow? Is he really an invincible existence? Moronyu felt a deep sense of helplessness. Step's shadow was only strong because of the shadow godly technique. If there were no shadows, his shadow godly technique would be completely ineffective. However, how could there be no shadows? Invisibility. Moronyu's mind suddenly flashed, following which his body flashed and disappeared from the spot. Invisibility, hiding one's body in the void. Even the original body could not be seen. So how could there be a shadow? Without a shadow, how could Step's shadow attack him? Moronyu was speechless. He had actually forgotten the best way to counterattack Step's shadow. Bang! 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 The creatures created by Moronyu were quickly killed by Step's shadow. In the end, only Step's shadow was left in the hall. As for Moronyu, he had already hidden himself, and no one knew where he was. Invisibility. Step's shadow's eyes flashed, and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. Invisibility was indeed the biggest nemesis of his shadow godly technique, because there was no shadow. However, Step's shadow was not anxious or worried. As long as Moronyu attacked, a shadow would appear. As long as there was a shadow, it would not be able to escape from his Step's shadow. However, would a shadow really only appear when he attacked? Space storm. Time freeze. Moronyu unleashed his most violent attacks. He directly attacked using the laws. These attacks were soundless and caught Step's shadow off guard. He was instantly injured. Although his injuries were not serious, he was still injured. Moreover, the most important thing was that this attack was effective. It was fine as long as it was effective. Following which, Moronyu simply entered a berserk state. The laws of time, the laws of space, and any attacks that did not have a shadow were all unleashed by him. So what if Step's shadow's realm was higher than Moronyu's by a small realm? His most powerful shadow godly technique did not have the power of bravery. What awaited him was Moronyu's death. Although the process was relatively slow, Step's shadow would die without a doubt. All right, kids, stop attacking. You have already passed my test. Step's shadow was battered and exhausted from the attacks. Suddenly, he stood still and said loudly, "Shwa! Shwa!" Moronyu did not have any intention of stopping. 2 attacks of time and space directly shattered Step's shadow's energy clone. "Little bastard, this is revenge." Step's shadow's furious voice came from afar, following which Moronyu seemed to have entered a teleportation array. After a moment of dizziness, he appeared in a space that was exactly the same as the hall he was in before. However, the space here was many times larger, and the main hall had a bit more vitality. This should be the inside of the real palace. Murong, you could clearly see balls of light floating in the hall. Inside the balls of light were the step shadow and the clones that had barged into the hall. Those should be the independent spaces where Murong you had fought with the step shadow clones. There was no one in the hall. There was only a skeleton sitting cross-legged at the back of the hall. Junior Murong, you greets Senior. Sorry for the disturbance. Murong you bowed to the skeleton. Murong you did this out of his own free will, and it was not an act. Not to mention whether he could obtain this master's inheritance. The skeleton was still a heaven-tier powerhouse. Just this point alone was enough for Murong Yu to bow. Kid, you're not bad. I have decided to take you as my disciple. The skeleton's voice suddenly sounded. Murong Yu stood where he was, looking at the skeleton calmly. He was not excited because the skeleton wanted to take him as a disciple. After a long while, the skeleton spoke again. However, his tone was filled with confusion and helplessness. Kid, why don't you look excited? Senior, I don't understand. Why do you want to take me as your disciple? Logically speaking, I haven't defeated you yet, because you know how to turn invisible. Invisibility is the greatest nemesis of the step shadow. If the step shadow and invisibility are combined on one person, the effect will be unexpectedly good. I am looking forward to seeing the effects of the step shadow after you cultivate it. The skeleton, which was also the step shadow, said excitedly. It was as if it was not the skeleton that wanted to pass the cultivation technique to Murong Yu. Instead, it was Murong Yu who wanted to pass the cultivation technique to him. Invisibility, step shadow, step shadow. The combination of the two techniques was probably much stronger than the step shadow alone. Murong Yu was also looking forward to it. He could not wait to cultivate the step shadow. However, should he become a disciple? What kind of person was this step shadow? Murong Yu hesitated. Until now, there were only two people that he had truly become a disciple of. The Sectless Sect Master and Elder Duan Han. Kid, don't hesitate. I don't have much time left. The skeleton suddenly said impatiently. At the same time, the skeleton raised one of its white skeletal hands and grabbed towards Murong Yu. Senior, you don't have to be so impatient, right? Let me think about it. Before Murong Yu could finish his words, an incomparably large amount of information crazily surged into his mind like a stormy sea. Chapter 2077. Rumble. Information surged into Murong Yu's memories like a tidal wave. Even though his soul had already reached the peak of the manifestation realm, it was still about to explode from the crazy influx of memories. Apart from the inheritance of the Step of Shadows, there should also be the memories of the Step of Shadows. Although there were many memories that Murong Yu did not need, the memories related to the inheritance of the Step of Shadows and his cultivation were incomparably precious. Furthermore, Murong Yu did not know which memories were more precious and could be accepted. However, they were completely useless. In reality, Murong Yu did not have a choice. All of this information was forcefully sent into his mind. With the strength of the Step of Shadows realm, Murong Yu could only accept it passively. Thus, Murong Yu could only grit his teeth and endure. If his soul could not take it and exploded, then it would be a tragedy for him. Thus, his main soul had already jumped out of the Hichu, Luoshu, and accepted the speed of the Step of Shadows with all his might. Half a day later, the memories of the Step of Shadows that surged into Murong Yu's mind slowly dissipated. Disciple, you must not let the inheritance of your master's life's work be lost. You must bring it to greater heights. At the same time, you must remember to take revenge for me. Otherwise, I will become your inner demon and coil around your soul. The voice of the Step of Shadows rang out in Murong Yu's mind, following which a vast wave of soul power quickly surged into Murong Yu's soul space. This was the soul power of the Step of Shadows. Murong Yu's expression changed slightly. The strength of the Step of Shadows' soul power exceeded his expectations. Furthermore, he could not understand why the Step of Shadows would do this. However, the Step of Shadows did not give Murongyu any time to think. The incomparably large soul power had already surged into Murongyu's soul space. Murongyu could only accept it passively. Otherwise, it would be too wasteful. Murongyu's soul sphere had already swelled to the size of an ordinary star. After the Step of Shadows' enormous soul power was swallowed by him, it could no longer be swallowed by the soul sphere. If he couldn't continue devouring soul energy, then how could he raise his realm and strength? Murongyu furrowed his brows as he pondered. Bang! At this moment, Murongyu was shocked to see that his soul sphere had suddenly exploded into 2 soul spheres. What was going on? Murongyu didn't have time to be surprised. He saw 2 soul spheres of almost the same size gently spinning around each other at the same time. With every rotation, a portion of the soul power that filled his soul space was devoured. After the original soul sphere split, it formed 2 planets of the same size. At this moment, after devouring Ta Ying's soul power, the 2 soul spheres rapidly grew. However, the amount of soul energy that the 2 soul spheres devoured was different. 90% of the soul power was devoured by one of the soul spheres. Therefore, this soul orb grew faster. When this planet grew to the size of the primordial star, Murongyu felt that his soul, which had been stuck at the creation realm, had been instantly upgraded. Insight stage. Finally, his soul broke through to the insight stage. His soul, cultivation, and physical body all reached the first stage of the insight stage, and it was balanced again. The moment his soul broke through, Murongyu clearly felt that his battle prowess had a terrifying increase again. At least 100 times difference. 100 times, which was a difference of 1 small realm. In other words, Murongyu's original battle prowess had only reached the peak of the 3rd stage of the creation realm. But now his battle prowess had already broken through to the 4th stage of the creation realm. His strength was terrifying. At this moment, in Murongyu's soul space, 2 soul spheres, one big and one small, were spinning slowly. What was different from before was that the soul sphere that was the size of the primordial star was only spinning slowly on the spot, while the soul sphere that was only the size of a normal planet was spinning slowly on its own, and it was also spinning around the big soul sphere. At the same time as the 2 soul spheres were spinning, Murongyu clearly saw streams of soul power continuously surging into his soul space from outside his body, and finally being devoured by the 2 soul spheres. With every minute that passed, the 2 soul orbs grew a little bigger, and Murongyu's soul naturally became a little stronger, although he couldn't feel the increase at all. But under the accumulation of time, the increase was quite terrifying. Moreover, the most important thing was that this wasn't Murongyu taking the initiative to cultivate. Under the situation where he didn't take the initiative to cultivate, the 2 soul spheres were still cultivating automatically. With a thought, Murongyu took the initiative to cultivate. Instantly, the 2 soul spheres sped up their rotation. Naturally, every moment, the amount of soul power that was wandering between heaven and earth that was devoured by them also increased. Murongyu was overjoyed. This kind of cultivation speed was more than 100 times faster than before. Even if there was no soul power to devour in the future, Murongyu's soul wouldn't improve too slowly. At least it wouldn't be ridiculously slow. Every time he broke through a small realm, Murongyu's battle prowess would increase by leaps and bounds, and it was very terrifying. This made Murongyu look forward to it. What if his strength broke through to the heaven realm? Not to mention the heaven realm. Even if he advanced to the creation realm, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the Milky Way star field. After stabilizing his current cultivation, Murongyu began to read and remove the memories of Stepping Shadow. Divine Shadow Technique was actually Stepping Shadow. Stepping Shadow was the name of this technique and also the name of Stepping Shadow. And Stepping Shadow was a powerful existence at the first level of the heaven realm. This technique wasn't actually created by Stepping Shadow himself. Instead, he had obtained it by accident, and later on, he had brought it to greater heights. With the strength of the first level of the Heaven Realm, coupled with the heaven-defying stepping shadow technique, Stepping Shadow should be able to do whatever he wanted in the Milky Way star field. How'd he fall? After all, the strongest in the Milky Way star field was only at the first level of the Heaven Realm. After reading the memories of Stepping Shadow, Murong Yu came to a realization. It turned out that Stepping Shadow wasn't a powerhouse from the Milky Way star field, but from another star field. However, the star field he was originally from was much more powerful than the Milky Way star field. Heaven Realm powerhouses weren't as common as dogs, but they were still quite common. They were equivalent to the Creation Realm cultivators of the Milky Way star field. Because Stepping Shadow had cultivated a heaven-defying technique, and because he was young and impetuous, he was naturally too proud of himself. In the end, he was ambushed by others, and was ultimately defeated and forced to flee the Milky Way star field. If he had been defeated, or even killed by others, Stepping Shadow wouldn't have been so resentful. He definitely wouldn't have wanted Murong Yu to take revenge for him. At that time, the people who had plotted against him were his best brother and the woman he loved the most. Originally, Stepping Shadow had wanted to personally take revenge. However, his injuries were too severe to heal. Thus, he placed a curse on Murong Yu. Murong Yu finally understood why Stepping Shadow was so kind as to give all of his spiritual strength to Murong Yu. It turned out that this guy didn't have good intentions. His spiritual strength carried a trace of the power of a curse, resentment. At this moment, it had already fused with Murong Yu's soul. As long as Murong Yu didn't take revenge and kill his enemies, this resentment would always exist. Fortunately, Stepping Shadow only wanted Murong Yu to take revenge. After Murong Yu took revenge for him, that trace of resentment would dissipate. Seeing that you not only raised the level of my spiritual strength, but also gave me the Stepping Shadow technique and inheritance, I won't bicker with you. In the future, when my strength reaches a certain level, I'll definitely help you get rid of that adulterous couple. Murong Yu thought to himself. Just as he finished speaking, he felt his soul loosen up. Stepping Shadow's trace of resentment had most likely rested. Although it still existed, it had already gone into hiding and wouldn't have any effect on Murong Yu anymore. This palace is actually a peak-level Heaven Realm defensive origin tool. Moreover, as long as I inject energy, it can explode with a Heaven Realm defense. Murong Yu observed the palace, and then, with a thought, Shwa. The clones of the cultivators who were originally in the palace suddenly saw themselves being pushed out by a wave of energy. As for their original bodies outside the palace, they saw that the originally majestic palace had already disappeared without a trace. Let's go. Murong Yu shrank the palace and put it away, then entered Hichu Luo Shu. Then, he too and the Book of the Luo teleported him away. From start to finish, no one realized that Murong Yu had taken the palace. They only thought that the palace flew away by itself. Big bad guy. How was it? Did you get the inheritance? Seeing Murong Yu walk over with a face full of joy, the little lowly immediately approached and asked, "What kind of intergalactic joke is this?" The giant panda looked at Murong Yu with disdain. It definitely wouldn't believe that Murong Yu could defeat the clones of Stepping Shadow. Murong Yu only glanced at the giant panda indifferently, then nodded to the little lowly. "Really?" The little lowly directly jumped up with a face full of joy. "Can I cultivate it?" "Of course you can." Murong Yu smiled. Then, with a tap of his finger, he imprinted the entirety of the shadow stepping technique into the little lowly's memories without reservation. It really is the stepping shadow technique. Haha, this beauty is going to be unparalleled in the world. The little lowly arrogantly laughed. In the end, her body flashed and disappeared from the spot. She should be cultivating. "Handsome, you really got that awesome technique?" The giant panda was first stunned, then had a face full of regret. In the end, it walked over licking its face. Murong Yu smiled at the giant panda and nodded. "Then, can I cultivate it too? At most, I'll admit that you're more handsome than me." The giant panda licked its face and said, "Scram." Murong sent the giant panda flying with a kick. This guy couldn't forget his narcissism even when he was begging for help. The giant panda rolled over and then looked at Murong with resentment, like a resentful wife. Murong couldn't help but shudder and quickly said, "Don't look at me like that. I'll give you the technique." In reality, Murong hadn't cultivated this technique yet. However, he had already passed it to his clone in the solar system. And his clone had already passed it to Zhao Jiqing, Yu Mengqing, Mu Liue, Kurlan, Situ Xian, and the others. Chapter 2078. Didn't Shadow Step ask Murong to carry forward this technique? Therefore, after Murong obtained this technique, he had already passed it on before he could cultivate it. Of course, those who could cultivate this technique were his own people. Murong had absolute trust in those people. Without Murong's permission, those people wouldn't leak the cultivation technique to anyone else. As for the giant panda, although he didn't spend much time with it, and this fellow was not only narcissistic, but also despicable. But Murong trusted this fellow. However, Murong was still careful and only gave part of the technique to the giant panda. If he knew the giant panda better in the future, perhaps he would give the complete technique to the giant panda. Of course, the prerequisite was that this fellow could cultivate it. Although Murong had not cultivated it, he had already taken a few glances at it. He realized that it was not so easy to cultivate Shadow Step. He had a feeling that although he had given Shadow Step to many people, there were not many who could cultivate Shadow Step. However, there are definitely not many people who could successfully cultivate it. In fact, there might not even be one. Haha, kid, you are indeed the most handsome human cultivator in the world. After receiving the technique, the giant panda laughed heartily and did not forget to flatter Murong before he left. Murong rolled his eyes, too lazy to bother with this narcissist. With a wave of his hand, an independent space had already formed. Sitting down cross-legged, Murong began to cultivate Shadow Step. This technique was quite mysterious. After cultivating it, it did not help one's cultivation level. Even if one succeeded in cultivating it, it would only increase Murong's battle strength, not his cultivation level. Because of the cultivation memories of Shadow Step, Murong easily grasped the key points. The shadow and the main body were actually one entity. It was just that the shadow was formless. Because they were one entity, even if one attacked the shadow, one could also hurt the main body. However, how did Shadow Step manage to injure the shadow? As he cultivated, Murong realized that after cultivating Shadow Step, a special power would appear in his body. In fact, power was also an intangible existence. Since both sides were formless existences, they could naturally attack or injure each other. Furthermore, the power cultivated from Shadow Step was even more ethereal than the power of primal chaos. It was as if this power did not exist at all. Even Murong, the person involved, could not feel the existence of that power. If it were anyone else, it would be even more impossible for them to sense the existence of the power. The reason why Shadow Step was called Shadow Step was because of this power. This kind of power burst out from under his feet and directly suppressed the shadow. Of course, as long as one had this kind of power, then regardless of whether it was the feet, the hands, or the body, one could suppress the physical body. However, the power of Shadow Step was extremely difficult to cultivate. After cultivating for half a day, Murong was finally able to cultivate a trace of this power. According to Tai Ying's memories, Murong's speed was considered fast. Back then, because the aptitude of the Shadow Step was ordinary, it took him a full 10 years to cultivate the first trace of the Shadow Step power. After that, he used an even longer time to cultivate the Shadow Step power to a level where he could fight. The Shadow Step power was like the power of faith, but it was much more bizarre. It could greatly increase Murong's battle strength. Because of that, Murong didn't do anything but practice the Shadow Step. Time acceleration. Only an instant had passed in the outside world, but tens of thousands of years had passed in Hichu Luo Shu. It might even be 100 million years. Time acceleration was definitely a bizarre cultivation method. After 100 million years, Muronyu stopped the time acceleration. Shadow step power. Muronyu closed his eyes and roared in his heart. Rumble. Within his body, within his meridians, a formless power suddenly began to surge like a torrent. It was like a raging wave that flowed through Murongyu's meridians. Muronyu slowly opened his eyes, and a slight smile appeared on his face. After 100 million years of cultivation, 1/3 of the shadow step power in his body already existed. If only the power stored in Murongyu's body was counted, it would definitely be much more than a 4th or even 5th level creation realm cultivator. Then 1/3 of the shadow step power was already quite terrifying. The shadow step power could not be directly converted from the power of chaos. If he wanted to continue increasing it, then he had to cultivate the shadow step. However, Muronyu had already stopped cultivating. Muronyu felt that 1/3 of the shadow step power was enough. If the shadow step power increased, then it would affect the power of chaos in his body. After all, the power of chaos was the main power, and Murongyu's battle strength was still the power of chaos. And the shadow step was only an auxiliary technique. However, this 1/3 of the shadow step power did not mean that there would always be this much. It would be continuously depleted as Murongyu used it. However, with Hichu Luoshu around, he only needed to accelerate time, and it would not take long for him to recover the shadow step power that was depleted. Brat, is the technique you gave this handsome cat fake? Why haven't I cultivated a single strand of hair after 100 million years? The moment Murongyu appeared in the isolated space where the giant panda was cultivating, the giant panda could not help but start cursing. Murongyu's face darkened, and he stepped out, directly stepping on the giant panda shadow. The giant panda was shocked, and with a thought, he wanted to retreat. However, he was shocked to find that his body had been fixed in place, and he could not move at all. It was the same as when he was frozen by the shadow step. Bang! Before the giant panda could react, Murongyu had already punched his panda eye. Aya! The giant panda let out a scream, and his entire body fell to the ground from the huge force. However, his feet were still nailed to the ground, and he could not move. Bang! 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 Murongyu raised his fist and punched the giant panda. Originally, the giant panda was no match for Murongyu in Hichu Luoshu. Now that his shadow was being stepped on, it was a tragedy. After a long time, Murongyu stopped attacking and let go of the giant panda's shadow. At this time, the giant panda was beaten black and blue. Poor cat, do you think the technique I gave you is real? Murongyu looked at the giant panda with a smile. However, his smile made the giant panda's hair stand on end. Haha, of course it's real. I can't cultivate it, and it might be because of my aptitude. The giant panda laughed dryly. But didn't I eat the chaotic primordial bamboo? Theoretically, my aptitude should have improved a lot. How could I not succeed in cultivating it? The giant panda muttered. In the end, he was still doubting the authenticity of the technique Murongyu gave him. Good things are all trampled on by pigs. Poor cat, you've wasted the chaotic primordial bamboo. Murongyu did not speak. The one who spoke was the little lowly who appeared out of thin air. The giant panda immediately glared at the little lowly. However, its face turned green in the next moment. Why was that? That was because it realized that the little lowly had stepped on its shadow. It didn't know if it was intentional or not. In order to prevent the little lowly from cultivating shadow step, she would beat it up like Murongyu. Therefore, the giant panda quietly tried to distance itself from the little lowly. However, what made it feel sad was that it was once again immobilized. Poor cat, take this beautiful girl's punch. The little lowly shouted, and her fist landed directly on the giant panda's other eye, causing it to cry out in pain. The tragic giant panda was trampled on by the little lowly for a long time before it left in anger. It decided that it must succeed in cultivating shadow step and then take revenge on Murongyu and the little lowly. After the giant panda left, the little lowly looked at Murongyu. Then, She took a step forward and stepped on Murongyu's shadow. Murongyu laughed. "Little lowly, don't waste your energy. You can't step on my shadow." The little lowly only revealed a charming smile at Murongyu, and her fist was already flying towards Murongyu's eyes. Shwa! Her fist was about to leave a panda eye on Murongyu's face. At this moment, Murongyu's figure suddenly disappeared. He disappeared without a trace, and even his shadow could not be seen. "I've already stepped on your shadow. How can you break free?" the little lowly exclaimed. "Without a shadow, how can you step on it?" Murongyu's voice sounded in the little lowly's ears. It turned out that he had already become invisible the moment the little lowly's fist arrived. Since he was invisible, how could there be a shadow? The little lowly was a little discouraged. So, shadow step isn't invincible. There's actually such a huge flaw. However, not everyone can become invisible, right? As she spoke, the little lowly was incomparably proud of herself. Murongyu's face darkened, and his figure flashed, and he had already left Hichu Luoshu. Other than him and the little lowly, no one else had been able to successfully cultivate the shadow step technique. After all, Zhao Jiqing and the rest didn't have any treasures that could accelerate time. Murongyu wondered if he should make a trip back to the solar system and help Zhao Jiqing and the rest to successfully cultivate this technique. As for investigating the Devil Crow, Xingyu, and the rest, he could temporarily put it aside. After all, Murongyu's current strength was still quite far away from theirs. However, before returning to the solar system, he still had to make a trip to a place. Go steal honey? I like it. The giant panda and the little lowly jumped out of Hichu Luoshu, and their faces were filled with excitement. Especially the giant panda. Its saliva had already flowed all over the ground. Honey was a good thing, and after his strength had increased greatly, Murongyu planned to get more honey to increase the strength of Zhao Jiqing and the rest. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for Glory's sect to only have him as the only one who could barely make a move. Chapter 2079. Not long after, Murongyu, little lowly, and the giant panda entered the space where the bees were. At this time, the space was very quiet. However, the silence did not mean that Murongyu could do whatever he wanted. On the contrary, when he stepped into the space, his face became serious. Under the calm surface, there was a stormy sea. "What's going on? Didn't we just touch some of their honey? Why are you so serious?" The giant panda's hair stood on end. It could feel the danger from a bees. F***CK. "Kid, you actually took away their best queen bee honey?" It was not until the giant panda caught a bee and read its memory that Murongyu and the rest knew what had happened. The queen bee honey had been stolen, and the queen bee was furious. At this time, if they found out that someone had broken into the space, the bees would definitely rush over and kill them. They would not stop until all the intruders were killed. The giant panda was immediately angry and gritted its teeth as it looked at Murongyu. Murongyu rolled his eyes. He knew that the golden honey was not ordinary, but he did not expect it to be the queen bee honey. The queen bee honey was the best honey. It was the essence of countless ordinary honey that had been refined and condensed. It was incomparable to ordinary honey. It was the most precious thing in the bee colony. This was because the queen bee honey could improve the aptitude and talent of the bees. In other words, if there was enough queen bee honey, the queen bee would be the first to break through to the celestial realm, and then the ordinary bees would break through to the celestial realm. Now that the queen bee honey had been stolen, how could the bee colony not be angry? Bad luck, cat. Whether it was the big bad guy who stole the queen bee honey or not is still a question. Even if he stole the queen bee honey, what does it have to do with you? Little lowly was unhappy with the giant panda. As she spoke, she looked at the giant panda with a dangerous gaze. The giant panda smiled embarrassedly. Little lowly was right, whoosh. Murongyu did not bother with the giant panda. He activated the Hichu Luoshu and appeared in the beehive, where he left the teleportation jade slip. Rumble. As soon as Hichu Luoshu appeared, waves of terrifying power poured down like a torrent. The immense power caused Murong Yu's expression to change. They were ambushed by bees. Murong Yu's heart sank. Hichu Luoshu flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was met with another barrage of attacks. The first time they were ambushed could be considered a coincidence, but the second time wouldn't be as simple as a coincidence. After being ambushed 3 times in a row, Murong Yu finally confirmed his suspicions. The bees had already discovered the teleportation formation he had placed earlier. At this time, the experts among the bees were guarding the teleportation jade slip, waiting for the opportunity. After trying a few more times, Murong Yu finally gave up and returned to the tunnel once more. Brat, let's barge in. After all, you guys know Shadow Step. Although those bees are strong, they shouldn't be a match for you guys. The giant panda instigated Murong Yu and his companion. The little lowly carried her giant axe and looked like she was eager to give it a try. Only Murong Yu's face was gloomy. His eyes were flickering. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, "You two stay in my treasure space. I'll go and collect the honey." After saying that, he took out Hichu Luoshu and wanted to keep the giant panda and his companion inside. However, these two fellows were stronger than Murong Yu. If they were unwilling, Murong Yu wouldn't be able to keep them inside. Murong Yu knew why the two of them were unwilling to enter Hichu Luoshu. Hence, without waiting for them to speak, Murong Yu continued, "If you stay outside, you'll be a burden to me. If you insist on doing so, even if you're in danger, I won't help you. Moreover, I'm afraid I won't be able to save you. Then be careful." The little lowly knew Murong Yu's character well, so she didn't hesitate and went straight into Hichu Luoshu. "Kid, after this, you must give me more honey," the giant panda said fiercely and also entered Hichu Luoshu. Although his strength was slightly stronger than Murong Yu's, in terms of life-saving means, he couldn't compare to Murong Yu. Once he hurt the beehive, he would be in danger of dying. Whoosh! After the little lowly and the giant panda, Murong Yu also entered Hichu Luoshu. In the next moment, Hichu Luoshu had already been transported to the next hive with a transmission jade slip. However, this time, Murong Yu made the first move. He didn't wait for the bees to make their move and had already summoned the Sky Realm Palace from a shadow step. Buzz! The palace expanded with the wind and instantly grew to the size of a small mountain. At the same time, a torrent of attacks poured down madly, all of them bombarding the palace. The palace trembled slightly, and a faint layer of light appeared on its surface. When the attacks of the bees fell on the layer of light, the light quickly trembled. Every time it trembled, a portion of those attacks would be dissipated. Murong Yu discovered that the palace didn't need to consume his strength. He only needed a little strength to maintain the palace. Moreover, he could explode with the palace's celestial realm-level defense. Unfortunately, the palace was only a defensive origin tool and couldn't be attacked at all. Otherwise, when the palace trembled, all the bees in the hive would be killed. Because of the celestial realm-level defense, the bees' attacks couldn't penetrate the palace at all, and Murong Yu didn't need to suffer any damage. However, he still discovered that his soul power was quickly being consumed. This celestial realm-level origin tool called Shadow Stepping Palace didn't consume strength, but it did consume soul power. If it were an ordinary cultivator, their soul power wouldn't be able to last for long. No wonder the Shadow Stepping Palace failed miserably. If he had Murong Yu's powerful soul strength, how could he have failed so miserably at such an easy task? With a thought, the Shadow Stepping Palace quickly expanded. In an instant, it grew to the size of the entire hive. In this way, the bees in the hive were naturally forced out of the hive. At the same time, Hichu Luoshu was released by Murong Yu and directly dived into the endless honey. After a few breaths, all the honey in the hive was devoured. Swish! Hichu Luoshu and the Shadow Stepping Palace shrunk at the same time, and Murong Yu took the opportunity to teleport away. At this time, the bees that came after hearing the news had already destroyed the hive. However, there was no trace of Murong Yu. Following the pattern, Murong Yu continuously collected the honey of more than 10 sub-hives. Without exception, the honey was of a higher grade. However, the further he went, the less honey he collected. This was because he missed many times. Moreover, many of the teleportation jade slips in the hives were destroyed one after another. The hives that weren't destroyed had a large number of experts among the bees waiting for him. Even though Murong Yu had 2 soul balls, if this continued, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Therefore, he stopped while he was ahead and quickly left the passage, returning to the solar system. Roar! Murong Yu had just stepped out of the Hichu Luo Shu when a huge, ferocious beast with a terrifying aura pounced on him, wanting to kill Murong Yu. A cold light flashed in Murong Yu's eyes. Bastard, do you think I'm a mon? As he spoke, he stomped down. Bang! The ferocious beast that was attacking was immediately frozen in the void, unable to move an inch. Murong Yu waved his hand, and a seal sealed the ferocious beast on the spot. When Murong Yu entered the sun crystal mine for the first time, he was almost killed by this ferocious beast. In a short few years, the ferocious beast still had the battle prowess of the Netherworld realm, but Murong Yu's battle prowess had already reached the 4th level of the Genesis realm. He could kill this ferocious beast with a raise of his hand. However, Murong Yu didn't kill it. Moreover, he didn't empty the sun crystal mine. He only took 1/3 of the sun crystals and left. He would let this sun crystal beast guard the sun crystal mine. The Lin family had already been wiped out, and other than the Lin family, Murong Yu's other opponents still didn't know about his relationship with Shenzhen. Therefore, Shenzhen and even the entire solar system had been relatively peaceful recently, and nothing had happened. Murong Yu was naturally happy to see such a situation. Therefore, in the following period of time, he kept his clone, Zhao Jiqing, the 5 girls, and other people who were close to him in He2 and Luo Shu. Time accelerated, and everyone cultivated Shadow Step under the time acceleration. However, Murong Yu didn't continue to cultivate. Instead, he entered the Shenyang Dao Mansion. The Shenyang Dao Mansion was left behind by an unknown powerhouse. There were still countless treasures of the Genesis realm. However, it was a pity that Murong Yu returned to the chaotic Shenzhen before he could break through. Shun Tian bowed respectfully to Murong Yu and said, "Sacred Master, someone from the Milky Way auction house is here to see you. He said that he has an urgent matter that requires your help." Just now, he had alarmed the clone that Murong Yu left in Shenzhen, and Murong Yu had rushed back from the Shenyang Dao Mansion. Milky Way auction house. Murong Yu couldn't help but think of Zhu Xiaoning. He and Zhu Xiaoning were considered good friends. However, Zhu Xiaoning had already left the solar system, and with the strength of the Milky Way auction house, why would they ask him for help? Could it be that they have nowhere else to go? Murong Yu scanned with his divine telekinesis, and he was surprised. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared from the main hall. Outside the main hall, a fat man was pacing back and forth anxiously. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him out of thin air. The fat man was shocked at first, then he was overjoyed. "Murong Yu, you finally appeared. Miss is in danger. Go and save her." This fat man was none other than the fat manager of the Milky Way auction house. Chapter 2080. Murong Yu looked at the fat manager in shock. Back then, when they met with danger in the endless starry sky, Murong Yu thought that he had died. After all, there were Genesis realm cultivators who participated in the battle. Although the fat manager was the manager of the Milky Way auction house, he really didn't have much weight among those Genesis realm cultivators. The reason he was able to keep his life should be because of Zhu Xiaoning. With a wave of his hand, Murong Yu and the fat manager disappeared. The fat manager was shocked. He was stunned by Murong Yu's strength. After all, not long ago, Murong Yu was only in the creation realm. Now, Murong Yu could move him, who was in the Netherworld realm, to another place with a wave of his hand. The place they appeared at was Shenzhen's sacred palace. "Fatty, what happened to Zhu Xiaoning? Logically speaking, shouldn't she be the daughter of some big shot in the Milky Way auction house? Why would she be in danger? Also, didn't she leave the solar system?" Regarding Zhu Xiaoning's safety, Murong Yu went straight to the point. The fat manager was so anxious that his face was covered in sweat. He hurriedly explained to Murong Yu. It turned out that Zhu Xiaoning was indeed the daughter of some big shot in the Milky Way auction house. And that big shot was one of the three ancestors of the Milky Way auction house. However, because of their previous relationship, the Heaven Realm inheritance was snatched away by the skeleton bandits. This naturally made the Milky Way auction house furious. Then, they directly sent out troops to suppress the skeleton bandits. The Milky Way auction house was very powerful, and they invited many friends to help. Therefore, the skeleton bandits suffered heavy casualties. They were almost in danger of being wiped out. However, the leader of the skeleton bandits, Skeleton, didn't appear from beginning to end. Just as the skeleton bandits were heavily injured and were being chased all over the world, the leader of the skeleton bandits, Skeleton, made a powerful appearance. He was a Heaven Realm cultivator and killed 2 of the 3 ancestors of the Milky Way auction house. Only Zhu Xiaoning's father escaped, but he was still seriously injured. Then, under Skeleton's leadership, the entire bandit group started a desperate counterattack. Almost overnight, they uprooted the Milky Way auction house and the forces that helped the Milky Way auction house. After all, there were only 11 Celestial Realm powerhouses in the entire Milky Way. Celestial Realm warriors were the absolute overlords of the Milky Way star field. Existences at the peak of the creation realm were not their match at all. At the same time, the other 10 Celestial Realm experts of the Milky Way star sector turned a blind eye. It seemed that they had already acknowledged the existence of Skeleton, a newly ascended Celestial Realm elite. Some of the people from the Milky Way auction house managed to escape. Zhu Xiaoning and Fatty were 2 of the few who managed to escape. However, the skeleton bandits and even other forces began to hit the Milky Way auction house while it was down. After all, Skeleton was already at the Celestial Realm. He was already one of the most powerful beings in the Milky Way. It was also from the moment he broke through to the Celestial Realm that the skeleton bandits had transformed from a shady organization that everyone despised to an honorable force. At this time, who dared to point fingers at the skeleton bandits? And because Skeleton was a Celestial Realm powerhouse, many forces were now willing to submit to him. Therefore, the ones who appeared to chase after the remaining people of the Milky Way auction house were not the skeleton bandits, but the forces that wanted to rely on the skeleton bandits. Zhu Xiaoning ran all the way and finally escaped to the solar system. However, the pursuers did not let her go and chased after her all the way. Now, she was trapped in a certain mystic realm. That mystic realm was discovered by Zhu Xiaoning before. It was also because of this that she could temporarily ensure her safety. However, there were creation realm existences among the pursuers. Zhu Xiaoning could not hold on for much longer. Fatty looked at Murong Yu with hope in his eyes. Originally, when Zhu Xiaoning asked him to ask for help from Murong Yu, he was still a little dismissive. Of course, he was already at his wit's end, so he could only try his best. However, after seeing Murong Yu's strength, he suddenly had a lot more confidence. However, if Murong Yu made a move, it would be a direct confrontation against Skeleton, a Celestial Realm powerhouse. Was he willing? Therefore, Fatty was a little nervous. However, he was obviously overthinking. Murong Yu was not the kind of person who would give up on his friends just because the opponent was strong. Not to mention Skeleton. Even if it was an enemy of a higher realm, he would not give up on Zhu Xiaoning. Therefore, he did not even have to think and directly said, "Where is Zhu Xiaoning now?" Hearing this, Fatty was pleasantly surprised. "Murong Yu, are you really willing to say my young miss? I thank you on behalf of my young miss." Murong Yu nodded. "Zhu Xiaoning is my friend. I will not give up on her. However, the opponent is very strong, and the final outcome is still unknown. You don't have to be so surprised." Fatty nodded. As long as Murong Yu was willing to help, it was fine. As for the outcome, no one could guarantee it. "My young miss is..." The fat manager immediately told him where Zhu Xiaoning was. "Bad luck, cat, let's go." After knowing the address, Murong Yu called the giant panda. Although he felt that his strength was not bad, What if the other party's realm surpassed level 4 of the Genesis realm? The giant panda was a high-level Genesis realm, so bringing it along would be more effective. Kid, what are you shouting about? This handsome cat is cultivating. The giant panda was originally cultivating in Hichu Luoshu, and now that it was summoned over by Murong Yu, it was very unhappy. This was because even under the situation of time acceleration, it still had not successfully cultivated Shadow Step. This made it feel that its aptitude was so bad that it was practically trash. Fight, are you going? Of course. It was not the giant panda who answered, but the little lowly. At this moment, the little lowly looked at the giant axe and appeared in front of Murong Yu and the others. Murong Yu's face darkened. He did not intend to let the little lowly appear. In many situations, the little lowly was usually the one who caused trouble. Go, go. The little lowly urged as soon as she appeared, even more anxious than Fatty. This made Murong Yu speechless. Thus, he did not bother to say anything and put the little lowly, Fatty, and the others into the Hichu Luoshu. Then, he unfolded his body and flew towards his destination. The place where Zhu Xiaoning was even more remote than the Holy World. It was also extremely far from the sun. Murong Yu first used the teleportation formation to teleport a certain distance, and then began to directly teleport through the endless starry sky. Murong Yu had not been to that place before, or he could have directly teleported there. Fortunately, after his battle prowess had increased to the Genesis realm, Murong Yu's speed was already extremely terrifying. After all, the solar system was only a small galaxy. To a Genesis realm powerhouse, it was actually not that big. To Murong Yu, the solar system was now like the Holy World after he became a paragon. Thus, it did not take long for him to appear in the mystic realm where Zhu Xiaoning was at. An immensely powerful divine consciousness spread out and instantly covered a small part of the mystic realm. Finally, Murong Yu found a group of people in the depths of the mystic realm. Among them, there were a few whose auras were especially powerful. They were Genesis realm existences. In the depths of the mystic realm, the gang members of the World Extermination Gang were cursing and swearing at the layers of formations in front of them. Zhu Xiaoning, you can't escape. In just a few days, we can easily break these formations. When that time comes, you will have nowhere to run. Woman, you really don't know what's good for you. It's rare that Skeleton Leader likes you. Skeleton Leader is a heaven-tier existence. It's your fortune to be his woman. Other people can't even hate you. The skeleton had taken a liking to Zhu Xiaoning. That guy really wants to eat young grass? Murong Yu's face darkened, and he took a step forward. Whoosh! The next moment, he appeared behind the World Extermination Gang members. What a bunch of shameless things. A bunch of men bullying a little girl. You guys are truly shameless. Murong Yu immediately started cursing them. Who? The World Extermination Gang members were shocked. Who else could it be other than the World Extermination Gang and Zhu Xiaoning? In their shock, they turned to look at Murong Yu. When they saw that Murong Yu was only a level 1 Insight Realm cultivator, they all sneered. Murong Yu looked through the crowd. Zhu Xiaoning was sitting cross-legged in the middle of layers of formations, and she seemed to be cultivating with her eyes closed. Even when Murong Yu spoke, she did not open her eyes. It seemed like the formations were blocking out the outside world. However, at least nothing had happened to Zhu Xiaoning. Murong Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief. If Murong Yu had wanted to rescue Zhu Xiaoning without anyone noticing, he could have done it this way. He could have turned invisible, entered the formations, and then put Zhu Xiaoning into the Hichu Luoshu before teleporting away. This way, even the World Annihilation faction wouldn't be able to discover Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu did not intend to do that. If he rescued Zhu Xiaoning, there was no guarantee that these people would not take their anger out on the solar system cultivators. They would then go on a killing spree. Therefore, Murong Yu did not want that to happen. He wanted to go on a killing spree. The World Extermination Gang members had actually attached themselves to the skeleton bandits. It was obvious that they were up to no good. Therefore, Murong Yu wouldn't feel any psychological burden even if he killed them all. Where did this trash come from? He must have a death wish. The World Extermination Gang was much stronger than the entire solar system. Even the weakest of the people chasing after Zhu Xiaoning was a high-level insight realm cultivator. At that moment, a high-level insight realm cultivator walked slowly toward Murongyu with a sinister smile. Whoosh! He reached out and grabbed at Murongyu. Murongyu also made his move and threw a punch at his opponent. Chapter 2081. When he saw Murongyu, his first thought was not to run, but to fight back. The World Extermination Gang members sneered. In the eyes of a high-level profound underworld cultivator, a first-stage profound underworld cultivator was worse than an ant. Bang! After a muffled sound, a bloody mist erupted from where the two sides had clashed. The World Extermination Gang members were still sneering. They all thought that one of them had smashed Murongyu to pieces with a single punch. However, the sneers on their faces soon froze. That was because they saw Murongyu standing unscathed in his original spot, looking at them with disdain. What was going on? The World Extermination Gang members were so confused that they couldn't react in time. Murongyu was only a first-stage profound underworld cultivator. How could he have killed a high-level profound underworld cultivator with a single punch? This brat must have used some kind of trick. A high-level profound underworld cultivator stepped forward and said murderously. At the same time, he threw a punch at Murongyu. The disdain on Murongyu's face deepened. Trash like you can only bully a weak girl. As he spoke, Murongyu had already taken a step forward. Swoosh! A long afterimage flashed past, and in the end, it flashed past the body of the high-grade netherworld insight cultivator. The high-level profound underworld cultivator stared at his own body in disbelief. In the next moment, he exploded into a bloody mist with a loud bang, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. How could the World Extermination Gang members not realize that Murongyu was actually pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger after killing a high-level profound underworld cultivator twice in a row without being able to retaliate? You must have a death wish. A Genesis Realm cultivator from the World Extermination Gang scolded with an ugly expression. Even Genesis Realm cultivators like them couldn't see the depth of Murongyu's strength, let alone the high-level profound underworld cultivators. In truth, to say nothing of creation tiers like them, even heaven tier elites would not be able to tell. What they could see was Murongyu's realm, but Murongyu's realm and battle prowess were not the same. Trash like you actually dare to chase after my friends. What's even more despicable is that you've actually attached yourselves to the skeleton bandits. There's no point in keeping you alive. Today, I will take care of all of you. Murongyu's expression was ice cold. He took a step forward and still appeared in front of this Genesis tier elite, stepping on his shadow. When he saw that Murongyu had actually come over to greet him, the fury in this creation tier elite's heart burned even brighter. Just as he was about to throw out a punch and kill Murongyu, he shockingly discovered that he had been immobilized. He couldn't move. Thus, under the confused gazes of the members of the World Extermination Gang, Murongyu's fist had already fiercely landed on this Genesis tier elite's body. With a pung, this Genesis tier elite was blasted into a bloody mist by Murongyu's punch, just like those high-level profound underworld cultivators. He couldn't be any more dead. What's going on? The members of the World Extermination Gang were once again thrown into disarray. Little bastard, die for me. Those Genesis tier elites were the first to react. As they roared furiously, they all attacked at the same time, all of them charging toward Murongyu. Murongyu's powerful battle prowess shocked them, and they felt threatened. Thus, they all attacked at the same time to kill Murongyu. Murongyu shook his head, not taking these people seriously at all. Perhaps the World Extermination Gang was very powerful, but the strongest among these people was only on par with Murongyu. Murongyu was a soul cultivator, and furthermore, he had cultivated the Shadow Step. Even if their battle prowess was on par with his, he could still easily kill them. He took a step forward, activated the power of the Shadow Step, and directly stepped on the shadow of one of them. Instantly, this Genesis tier elite was frozen in place. Even though he was a powerful Genesis tier elite, this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. In his panic, Murong Yu's fist, which contained a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth, had already landed on his body. Without any suspense, this Genesis tier elite was killed by Murong Yu. Killing 2 Genesis tier elites in succession was as easy as slaughtering chickens. The members of the World Extermination Gang were all scared stiff. Even the remaining Creation Realm powerhouses felt a chill run down their spines. Murong Yu's threat was too great. The remaining 3 Creation Realm powerhouses looked at each other and then simultaneously flew in the other 2 directions. Not only was Murong Yu powerful, but he was also very strange. They deeply felt the threat that came from his life. Although capturing Zhu Xiaoning would allow them to curry favor with the skeleton, this heaven tier elite, they had to keep their lives. Thus, they quickly fled. None of you can escape, Murong Yu said calmly, and then used his speed to step on the shadow of one of the Genesis tier elites. Instantly, this Genesis tier elite, who had been speeding away, was frozen in place. Save me, this Genesis Realm powerhouse roared in horror, wanting the other 2 Genesis Realm powerhouses to save him. However, his cry for help caused the other 2 to speed up their escape. In the end, this Genesis tier elite was still killed by Murong Yu with a single punch. Where do you think you're going? After killing the 3rd Genesis Realm expert, Murong Yu didn't continue to chase after the other 2 Genesis Realm cultivators who were still fleeing. Just as those 2 Genesis tier cultivators breathed a sigh of relief, a little lowly carrying a giant axe and a cute panda respectively appeared in front of them. Scram! Seeing that someone had stopped them, those 2 Genesis tier elites were immediately enraged. With a roar, they sent a slap toward the panda and the little lowly. The little lowly and the panda were instantly enraged. In particular, the little lowly's pretty face was cold, and the giant axe in her hand was already swiftly slashing down. Even a cat or dog dares to attack me. The little lowly's opponent was enraged and exploded with power that reached the heavens as he charged toward the little lowly. However, he did not know that those who followed Murong Yu were all freaks. The little lowly took a step forward and directly stepped on the shadow of this Genesis tier elite. She directly froze this person. Then, before this person could even react, the little lowly's giant axe had already slashed down. He had sliced this Creation Realm elite's soul and body into 2. Dead. The other side was even more straightforward. The panda was originally a high-level Genesis tier elite, and after eating the primal chaos bamboo and a large amount of honey, its cultivation level had already broken through again, and it was much stronger than its opponent. One claw. With just one claw, that Genesis tier elite was smashed into a pile of mush. The panda shook its head with its skin and then said disdainfully, "This handsome cat is very strong. Even if I don't know Shadow Step, it won't affect me at all." The little lowly glanced at the panda and said disdainfully, "Can I take this as you comforting yourself?" The panda weakly retorted, "All demons and monsters are unable to withstand a single blow in the face of absolute strength." The little lowly did not say anything and only looked at the panda with disdain. Even a fool could tell that the panda was not speaking from its heart. "Big baddie. How should we deal with these big baddies?" Murong Yu's face darkened. Wasn't the little lowly associating him with the World Extermination Gang? He was not as shameless and despicable as these people. "Just kill them," Murong Yu said calmly. "These were not good people, and there was no guilt in killing them." "I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time," the little lowly exclaimed excitedly, and was about to take out her giant axe and start a massacre. But before she could, the panda had already made the first move. Pooh! 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 The panda struck out with its paw, and countless World Extermination Gang members were killed. A large number of them died in one go. "Wretched cat! How dare you steal from me?" The little lowly was enraged. She took out her giant axe and started a massacre. Instantly, the World Extermination Gang members, who had already scattered in all directions, began to flee in a frenzy. However, under the attacks of the little lowly and the panda, they had nowhere to run. At that moment, Morongyu had already released the fat manager from the Hichu Luo Shu. "Young miss!" The fat manager couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Zhu Xiaoning, who was sitting cross-legged and cultivating in the middle of layers of formations. He was about to rush over. However, he was stopped by Morongyu. "Zhu Xiaoning should be cultivating now. Don't disturb her," Morongyu said calmly. At first, Morongyu thought that Zhu Xiaoning was trapped in the formation. But after some observation, he realized that Zhu Xiaoning seemed to have had a fortuitous encounter. She wasn't trapped, but cultivating. "Young miss will be fine, right?" The fat manager looked worriedly at Morongyu, then at Zhu Xiaoning, who was trapped in the formation. He couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. "Don't worry. Even if she wanted to, it would be difficult for anything to happen to her." Morongyu was very confident. With his physique, there was nothing stopping him from entering and exiting the formation. Thus, he could rescue Zhu Xiaoning as soon as he sensed that something was amiss. However, Zhu Xiaoning had yet to break through to the next realm. She was still at the peak of the manifestation realm. How had she managed to escape all the way here with this level of strength? Young Miss has the Patriarch's treasures on her. However, Young Miss's cultivation level is still too low. Many treasures can't be used to their full potential. Otherwise, these World Extermination Gang members would have been killed long ago, the fat manager said viciously. Morongyu nodded. That made things easier for him to understand. "Big baddie, what do we do now?" The World Extermination Gang members had already been wiped out by the little lowly and the giant panda. The little lowly was looking at Zhu Xiaoning, who was jumping around as if she wanted to break the formation by force. Morongyu jumped in fright and quickly stopped the little lowly. Zhu Xiaoning was clearly at a critical juncture. He couldn't let the little lowly ruin it. "How boring. I'd better cultivate in your treasure space." The little lowly pursed her lips and entered the Hichu Luo Shu. The giant panda followed closely behind her and secretly went to practice the shadow step. Although it made it sound nice, it was still very conflicted about not being able to successfully cultivate this technique. Chapter 2082. Rumble, Morongyu, and the Fat Manager didn't have to wait for long before the layers of formations surrounding Zhu Xiaoning exploded. As the formations disappeared, Zhu Xiaoning's figure appeared on top of Morongyu and the Fat Manager. However, Zhu Xiaoning was still sitting cross-legged on the spot, as if she was still cultivating. Morongyu frowned slightly. The formations had exploded, not because they had run out of energy to support them. It was more like the formations had automatically broken after Zhu Xiaoning had succeeded. If that was the case, shouldn't Zhu Xiaoning have woken up? If she hadn't woken up and Morongyu hadn't rushed over, wouldn't she have exposed herself to the World Extermination Gang? Given Zhu Xiaoning's insight realm cultivation, there was no way she could have escaped. Soon, Morongyu realized that something was amiss. After the formation shattered, Zhu Xiaoning's aura suddenly became chaotic. At first, it was just a mess, but soon, the aura in her body became chaotic like a storm. This was a sign of chi deviation. Morongyu was shocked. At the same time, the Fat Manager took a big stride forward and dashed forward. He wanted to help Zhu Xiaoning. Morongyu rolled his eyes. The Fat Manager was only at the first level of the insight realm. Even if he tried to help, he would only be a hindrance. He wouldn't be of any use. In fact, his help might even worsen Zhu Xiaoning's condition. Thus, Morongyu reached out and pulled the Fat Manager to the side. He dashed forward like an arrow. His strength was enough to suppress the rampaging energy in Zhu Xiaoning's body. The energy was extremely violent, forming a small tornado around Zhu Xiaoning's body. Just as Morongyu stepped into the tornado's range, a powerful force violently bombarded his body, wanting to tear him apart. At the same time, Zhu Xiaoning's already pale face turned even paler. Finally, she spat out a mouthful of blood. She was injured. And this was only the first impact. The fat manager in the distance almost cried out in alarm. On the other hand, Morong Yu's expression was somewhat solemn. Zhu Xiaoning's situation was much more serious than he had imagined. With a thought, he reached out his hand and pressed it down. Zhu Xiaoning's berserk energy transformed into a tornado that crushed down on Morong Yu's giant hand, wanting to tear it apart. However, no matter how berserk Zhu Xiaoning's strength was, she was still only at the first level of the Netherworld realm. And Morong Yu's battle prowess was as high as the fourth level of the creation realm. With Morong Yu's suppression, Zhu Xiaoning's berserk energy quickly calmed down. In the end, he was suppressed by Morong Yu to the point that he could not move. However, because of Morong Yu's suppression, the power in Zhu Xiaoning's body became even more violent, almost tearing her apart. With a thought, Morong Yu sent a tremendous amount of divine sense into Zhu Xiaoning's body. As a result, the power in Zhu Xiaoning's body was also suppressed, and she could no longer move. Then, Morong Yu's divine sense entered Zhu Xiaoning's soul space. There were two kinds of situations that could cause qi deviation. One was that one was unable to suppress and control the power in one's body, causing qi deviation. This situation was very easy to recover from. As long as the chaotic power in one's body was suppressed, it would be fine. The second kind of qi deviation was extremely dangerous, and that was when there was a problem with one's mind and soul. Zhu Xiaoning was not just unable to control her power. Sure enough, when Morong Yu saw Zhu Xiaoning's soul, he went crazy. His soul space was in chaos. His divine sense was in chaos. When he saw Morong Yu's divine sense again, he directly attacked. He could not recognize Morong Yu at all. The reason for this situation was very likely because Zhu Xiaoning had suddenly encountered a drastic change and was being hunted down, so she had lost her mind for a moment. If it was an ordinary Genesis realm expert, even a high-level Genesis realm expert, they would be helpless in this situation. However, Morong Yu is a soul cultivator, and he had an extremely deep understanding of souls. When Zhu Xiaoning's soul attacked, Morong Yu's divine sense also quickly rushed into Zhu Xiaoning's soul space, and then directly controlled Zhu Xiaoning's soul. Even so, Zhu Xiaoning still bared her fangs and claws at Morong Yu. Zhu Xiaoning, wake up! Morong Yu first protected a part of Zhu Xiaoning's soul, and then he directly roared. Zhu Xiaoning froze for a moment, but then she immediately went crazy again. From the looks of it, shouting like this was not enough to wake her up at all. Morong Yu shook his head helplessly. Since this did not work, he would just do it directly. Thus, his enormous divine sense quickly pierced into Zhu Xiaoning's soul, and he directly began to sort out her chaotic soul. During this process, Morong Yu could not help but see Zhu Xiaoning's memories. He even discovered some of Zhu Xiaoning's womanly secrets. Under Morong Yu's forceful intervention, Zhu Xiaoning's chaotic soul gradually woke up. By the time a third of it was sorted out, Zhu Xiaoning had already regained consciousness. Morong Yu, it's you? The moment she regained consciousness, Zhu Xiaoning immediately noticed Morong Yu. Then, he exclaimed in surprise. Morong Yu's expression was a bit calm. Do you know that you've gone crazy? Almost dead? Don't speak, recover first. As he spoke, Morong Yu's divine sense withdrew from Zhu Xiaoning's soul space. Zhu Xiaoning only stopped talking because the matter was urgent, and she recovered. With Morong Yu's help, Zhu Xiaoning quickly recovered to her normal state. In fact, her recently broken-through cultivation was also stabilized. Morong Yu, thank you. After recovering, Zhu Xiaoning stood up and came to Morong Yu's side, speaking to Morong Yu affectionately. Morong Yu had seen Zhu Xiaoning's memories before, and he already knew that Zhu Xiaoning liked him. However, Morong Yu had long since decided not to accept other women. After all, he already had 5 wives. Thus, he pretended not to see it and only nodded slightly. Then he glared at Zhu Xiaoning. Zhu Xiaoning, although you've encountered a drastic change, you don't need to bear such a huge pressure and hatred. Even if you encountered a fortuitous opportunity, strength is not something that can be forced. If I hadn't happened to come this time, you would have disappeared long ago. Murong Yu's expression couldn't help slightly changing at this point. He had seen Zhu Xiaoning's memories before, and already knew that Zhu Xiaoning's mind was in a mess because of the Milky Way auction house, and she wanted to break through to the heaven realm in one go. That was why she went berserk. Murong Yu had even seen this, so how could he not know what Zhu Xiaoning was thinking? Zhu Xiaoning was also a smart person, but she wasn't as bold as Kurlan. Kurlan had chased after Murong Yu back then, and only then did she become Murong Yu's fifth wife. Zhu Xiaoning didn't say it directly, and only looked at Murong Yu bitterly. Murong Yu couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He really didn't want to hurt such a good woman. However, the heavens were toying with him. "Miss!" The fat manager also rushed over. After seeing that Zhu Xiaoning was fine, a smile finally appeared on his fat face. "All right, it's fine. Let's go back first." Murong Yu waved his hand and was about to leave. There were some treasures in this mystic realm, but they had already entered Zhu Xiaoning's bag. "Wait." Zhu Xiaoning called out to Murong Yu. Murong Yu looked at Zhu Xiaoning. "Young Miss Zhu, you can't be thinking of asking me to help you take revenge, right?" This was Murong Yu's joke. Zhu Xiaoning's soul didn't have such memories or thoughts before. After all, she didn't know that Murong Yu's strength was already so heaven-defying before. Zhu Xiaoning nodded solemnly, and the smile on Murong Yu's face instantly froze. The enemy of the Milky Way auction house was Skeleton, a heaven-tier existence. Although his battle prowess had already reached the fourth stage of the creation realm, there was still a huge gap between him and Skeleton. How could he take revenge? Even if Murong Yu didn't agree to Zhu Xiaoning's request, he would still have to fight Skeleton. However, at least Murong Yu didn't promise anything, so he could make a move at any time. If he agreed, he would have to bear a promise. With his personality, he definitely wouldn't trample on his own promises. If he promised something, he would definitely do it. "Don't be in a hurry to reject me. If you agree to help me take revenge, I don't want you to take revenge in a short period of time. I just hope that you can kill Skeleton when you have the ability." At this point, a terrifying killing intent flashed across Zhu Xiaoning's eyes. Our Milky Way auction house also controls a mystic realm that is at least at the mid-stage of the heaven tier. There is a heaven tier inheritance inside. If you agree to help me take revenge and protect me during this period of time, I will give you that mystic realm. Also, I will give you the Milky Way auction house's secret treasury as well. The Milky Way auction house was the largest auction house in the Milky Way star field. After being destroyed by the skeleton bandits, their many years of savings had become the skeleton bandit spoils of war. However, the Milky Way auction house had existed for so many years, so they definitely had a secret treasury or something. Murong Yu had touched on this point from Zhu Xiaoning's memories. It was just that he didn't know where that secret treasury was. Our secret treasury stores peerless treasures. Zhu Xiaoning looked at Murong Yu with a sly glint in her eyes. This woman's thoughts were definitely not limited to this. According to Murong Yu's understanding of her, she should be proud of one of her conditions: protect Zhu Xiaoning before Murong Yu killed Skeleton. Then, during this period of time, could Zhu Xiaoning be together with Murong Yu? Murong Yu was immediately tempted. He had to fight Skeleton eventually. If he agreed to Zhu Xiaoning's request, there would be an unexpected gain. Why wouldn't he do such a good thing? Moreover, Zhu Xiaoning didn't have any relatives or friends now. He didn't feel at ease leaving her alone outside. Chapter 2083. After pondering for a while, Murong Yu readily agreed. Zhu Xiaoning was overjoyed, and the fat manager was also relieved. He had already felt Murong Yu's terrifying cultivation speed. In time, he would definitely surpass the three patriarchs of the Milky Way auction house and become a heaven-tier existence on the same level as the skeleton and the others. Zhu Xiaoning's future would be bright if she followed such a man. However, the fat manager was obviously overthinking it. Murong Yu was not interested in Zhu Xiaoning. "Let's go. I'll take you to that mystic realm." Zhu Xiaoning did not hesitate and urged Murong Yu to go to the mystic realm. She seemed to be a little impatient. Aren't you afraid that I won't help you take revenge after I get the treasure in the mystic realm? Murong Yu looked at Zhu Xiaoning with amusement, not knowing what she was so anxious about. Zhu Xiaoning rolled her eyes at Murong Yu. If that's the case, then I'll take it that I misjudged you. Murong Yu smiled slightly. Of course, he was not that kind of person. He was just joking. However, the mystic realm that Zhu Xiaoning mentioned was rumored to have the inheritance of a mid-stage heaven tier. Even the three patriarchs of the Milky Way auction house, who were at the peak of the creation realm, did not dare to go there, let alone Murong Yu now. It would definitely be dangerous. Even if Murong Yu went there now, he might not be able to go deep, let alone get the inheritance of a heaven tier expert. Therefore, Murong Yu rejected her. If he had the time, he might as well go to the rising sundown mansion to cultivate or loot the secret treasury of the Milky Way auction house. After all, a long night might bring more trouble. In fact, Murong Yu was more inclined to go back to the rising sundown mansion to cultivate. After all, his enemies were too powerful now, and he urgently needed to improve his strength. Otherwise, with his current strength, it was really not enough. I'm not going to the mystic realm, and I'm not interested in the secret treasury. Murong Yu, are you just patronizing me? Zhu Xiaoning was a little angry. The most important thing right now is to increase my strength. Without sufficient strength, how can I take revenge? Murong Yu glared at Zhu Xiaoning. With a wave of his hand, he sent her and the fat manager into the Hichu Luo Shu. In the next moment, Murong Yu appeared in the Shenyang Dao mansion. Murong Yu cultivated the chaotic celestial body, which allowed him to cultivate all the way to the level of chaos controller. He didn't need to cultivate other techniques. Therefore, he did not need other cultivation techniques. However, even if he didn't need it, Zhao, Jiqing, Shengzhen, and the others did. However, because of the Shenyang Dao mansion, Murong Yu did not really care about other legacies. This was because the Rising Sun Dao mansion had many top-notch inheritances of various grades. However, the other treasures in the Shenyang Dao mansion could not be brought out for use. Inheritances could still be brought out with skills, but things like origin crystals and all kinds of natural treasures could not be brought out. They could only be used here. Currently, Murong Yu is the only one who could freely enter and leave the Shenyang Dao mansion. Without his help, the others could not enter at all. Therefore, Murong Yu still valued other natural treasures, such as the secret treasury of the Milky Way auction house. Murong Yu went straight into the Genesis realm area. Dongfang Lang and the others were also brought in by Murong Yu to cultivate in the Insight realm area. As for Zhao Jiqing, the giant panda, and the others, they continued to cultivate the Shadow Step in the Hichu Luo Shu. It was worth mentioning that other than Murong Yu and the little lowly, Zhao Jiqing was the third person to cultivate the Shadow Step and successfully cultivated this magical technique. As for the others, they still needed to work hard. Murong Yu's cultivation was very simple. He just needed to constantly devour energy. Therefore, after entering the Shenyang Dao mansion, he went straight to his destination, the space where the origin crystals were stored. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the origin crystals, Murong Yu began to devour. Time continued to pass, and a large number of origin crystals were turned into powder because the origin tools contained in them were devoured. Murong Yu's strength also increased rapidly. Cultivation, second stage of the Insight realm. Physical body, second stage of the Insight realm. With Murong Yu's efforts, other than his soul, his cultivation and physical body broke through again and reached the second stage of the Insight realm. However, because of Murong Yu's uniqueness, although his combat strength had been greatly improved, it still remained at the peak of the fourth stage of the Genesis realm. Cultivation and physical body could be improved by directly devouring energy, but the Shenyang Dao mansion did not provide Murong Yu with soul power to devour. However, the large and small soul balls in Murong Yu's soul space were constantly devouring the soul power and soul fragments drifting between heaven and earth. Although the speed of Murong Yu's soul was not as fast as his cultivation and physical body, it was not slow either. Because of his soul, Morong stopped devouring energy. Because no matter how much energy he devoured, he could not continue to break through. He could only continue to break through after his soul broke through to the second stage of the insight realm. When Morong broke through, Zhao Jiqing and the others also broke through again. Zhao Jiqing, Yu Mengqing, Mu Liyue, Kurlan, and Situ Xian all succeeded in cultivating Shadow Step. It was just that their Shadow Step power was somewhat different. Among them, Zhao Jiqing's Shadow Step power was the most, and it had already reached 1/3 of Morongyu's. The second was Situ Xian. Yu Mengqing, Mu Liyue, and Kurlan were about the same. Apart from them, the large black dog had actually also succeeded in cultivating this technique. Although the Shadow Step power was very little, it was still a success. This made the large black dog very smug. The giant panda, on the other hand, was extremely depressed because it had not succeeded in cultivating it. On the other side, Shun Tian, Dongfang Lang, and the other's strength had also increased greatly. They had already reached the peak of the Insight Realm, and were only one step away from breaking through to the Genesis Realm. However, with their aptitude, even with the rising Sundown Mansion, it would still take some time for them to break through to the Genesis Realm. Morongyu did not intend to leave the rising Sundown Mansion and continue to cultivate here. However, a group of uninvited guests had arrived in the solar system. The members of the World Annihilation Gang had crossed the endless starry sky and arrived in the solar system. These were the elites of the World Annihilation Gang, and their strength was much stronger than those who had chased after Zhu Xiaoning. They were all Genesis Realm existences. Solar system, outside the sun. A huge starry sky ship was flying over from afar. A group of powerful cultivators with surging auras stood on the deck of the starship. Blow up this solar system for me. How dare they kill the disciples of the World Annihilation Gang? They must have a death wish. Destroy the sun first, then flatten the entire solar system. I'd like to see who else dares to touch the World Annihilation Gang. A deputy leader of the World Annihilation Gang said, with a ferocious expression. Before the deputy leader of the World Annihilation Gang could finish his sentence, the powerful members of the World Annihilation Gang were about to unleash their strongest attack to destroy the sun. At that moment, the entire sun was shrouded in an aura of death. Shenzhen and the others looked at the starship that was emitting a dangerous aura in the starry sky and were extremely nervous. Meanwhile, some of Shenzhen's higher-ups had already begun to guide Shenzhen's disciples and had them teleport away through the teleportation portal. However, there were only a few teleportation portals on the sun. How could they teleport everyone away in such a short time? It's over. It's over. Where did the World Annihilation Gang come from? They want to destroy our entire solar system? Many people in Shenzhen were so frightened that their legs turned to jelly. The aura of a Genesis Realm powerhouse could suppress the entire sun, let alone a large group of Genesis Realm powerhouses. The World Annihilation Gang was about to unleash their strongest attack to destroy the sun. At that moment, a figure appeared on the starship out of thin air. Kill! There was a shocking roar, and a large group of Genesis Realm powerhouses on the starship immediately fell to the ground. At the same time, a giant axe descended from the sky and ruthlessly chopped down on several Genesis Realm powerhouses. This handsome cat is here. All of you die. After the giant axe, an adorable panda also jumped out of thin air. Pooh! Wherever the gigantic axe passed, a large group of creation tier elites was directly cleaved into two halves. In fact, even their souls were unable to escape and were all cleaved into two halves, killed by the explosion. On the other side, the panda was even more violent. After all, it was a genuine high-level Genesis Realm powerhouse. And among the World Annihilation Gang members, the strongest was only the deputy leader, who was at the 6th stage of the Genesis Realm. Morongyu, the little lowly, and the panda attacked powerfully. The moment they appeared, more than 3/4 of the World Annihilation Gang's Genesis Realm powerhouses were killed. Now, less than 1/4 of the World Annihilation Gang cultivators were left, and these people hadn't reacted yet. Swoosh! Moronyu summoned the Heaven-Tier Palace from the Shadow Step. It floated above his head and exploded with a Heaven-Tier defense. At the same time, Moronyu attacked again. Soul Storm. Right from the start, Moronyu launched his strongest and most indefensible soul attack. Kill them all. The first person to react was the most powerful deputy leader of the World Annihilation Gang. However, what he didn't know was that he had already been targeted by Moronyu. Just as he roared, Moronyu took a step forward and stomped on his shadow with his foot. And this deputy leader still didn't know what was going on. Shio! Moronyu had already taken out his weapon fragment. Carrying a frightening aura that could destroy the heavens and earth, it swiftly slashed towards the Vice Guildmaster. At the same time, Holy Soul Slash. 9 syllables of truth. The most powerful attack was also unleashed by Moronyu in an instant, ruthlessly blasting toward the deputy leader of the World Annihilation Gang. A disdainful smile appeared on the deputy leader's face. He didn't care about Moronyu's cultivation level. But very quickly, the disdainful smile on his face turned into a look of horror, because he realized that his physical body had been immobilized, and even the power in his body had been immobilized. His physical body couldn't move, and he couldn't use his power. Wasn't he just a sitting duck? Just as this thought appeared in the deputy leader's mind, Moronyu's extremely violent attack was already pouring down on him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.